Good morning. Could we start with the roll call, please?
Good morning. Director Schenk. Vice Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Curtin.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Senator Bell. Assemblymember Arambula.
Here.
Chairman Donza.
Here.
Director Perea.
Here.
Director Guillemette. Director Escotilla. Escotilla. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you and good morning, everyone. I hope everyone had a wonderful Valentine's Day on Friday and a great weekend celebrating our great presidents and an opportunity to spend some time enjoying this lovely state. I know I did. I was in Santa Cruz for the weekend with my family and my granddaughter, who's now 5 months old, and also my other daughter told us that weekend that she's having a baby as well, so we're going to have 2 grandkids. So it was a great weekend for me, at least. And just gave me one more reminder about why we need to, in everything we're doing in our service as we are today, to think about our future generations and ensure we have a state and a dream that is available for them as it was for us. So with that, I'd like to welcome the members of the board and the public. Welcome to our California High-Speed Rail Board meeting for Tuesday, February 18th, 2020. And today I'd really want to start by welcoming our newest board member, Senator Martha Escutia. Senator Escutia served in both the California State Assembly and the California State Senate, representing districts in Los Angeles. She currently serves as the Vice President for Government Relations at the University of Southern California, undoubtedly endearing her to her board member sitting to her left, a proud USC alumnus, Henry Perea. So, sorry, on. All right, well, we love all of our universities, especially the California ones and our transplants to California, so thank you, Danny. But welcome, Senator Escutia. We're delighted you're on board. And I also want to take this time to thank former board member Bonnie Lowenthal for her outstanding service to the state of California and to the High-Speed Rail Authority. So welcome. Today, the board has before it a series of very important informational items that I hope will serve as a basis for good, detailed, and respectful discussion among the board members and members of the public. As many of the board members will recall, in response to a staff recommendation in the May 2019 project update report to expand the 119-mile construction segment between Madera and Popular Avenue to an operational 171-mile electrified high-speed rail segment connecting the cities of Merced, Fresno, and Bakersfield, the board appropriately asked for additional analyses. Today, we're going to hear presentations about those analyses. First, we'll hear from our Director of Rail Operations, Frank Vaca, and the early train operator, DB Engineering and Consulting USA, on the final conclusions and recommendations of the so-called side-by-side analysis requested by board members Camacho and Curtin last summer. Second, we will have a presentation from Dan Feidelberg from our financial advisor, KPMG. Mr. Feidelberg will present to the full board the work his firm did at the request of Finance and Audit Committee Chairman Tom Richards, known as the refined business case study for the Merced to Bakersfield segment. And third, as you all know, the draft 2020 business plan was released last Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. As with the 2018 business plan, this was released as management's recommendation to the board on how to move forward on the project. Guided by the results of the analysis conducted by DB Engineering and KPMG, the plan recommends to the board moving forward with the Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield early operating segment as the first building block for the Phase 1 system between San Francisco and Los Angeles, Anaheim. Today, our CEO, Brian Kelly, will present the draft business plan to the board and take questions from board members. As a reminder to the board and members of the public, the release of this draft business plan starts a 60-day public review process. This is the first of 3 public hearings the board will have on that draft plan. We'll meet in March in Los Angeles to take further public comment on the plan, and we'll meet again in April in Fresno to adopt the final plan in time for the May 1st statutory submittal deadline to the legislature. So we will have a lot of opportunity for public comment, and I'm sure, based on the cards I've received already, we will have plenty of that today, and it's an important part of the process to ensure that the public has the opportunity to comment on important investments that we're all making for the future of California's transit system. Today, because of the breadth, depth, and interest in each of the presentations that we are hearing from, we're going to conduct public comment a little bit differently. First, we will take general public comment on the program at the outset of today's meeting, just as we do for every other meeting. So I've got a series of comments that I will go to after we approve the minutes. But we will take some more time to get more focused public comment after the presentations on agenda items 2 and 3, the side-by-side and refined business case study presentations. And finally, we'll take additional public comment on just the 2020 business plan at the conclusion of CEO Kelly's presentation of that plan on agenda item 4. So if you're here to comment on a specific agenda item, please prepare accordingly. General comments first, comments on the 2 studies second, and then comments on the 2020 business plan third. Okay? So you can sign up to make public comment by filling out one of these green cards and giving it to the staff, who will in turn bring the card forward to me at the appropriate time. Because as we anticipated, there is great interest in today's hearing, I would respectfully ask the members of the public to be brief in your comments so that we may hear from all of those who wish to be heard. Thank you for your interest and indulgence. And with that, I'd like to move forward with today and start with the consideration of the minutes from our January meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the January meeting? Is there a second? Okay.
Vice Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Curtin, Director Camacho, Director Miller,
Yes.
Chairman Donza,
Yes.
Director Perea, Director Escotilla. Motion carries.
Thank you. And now we will move on to public comment from the general comment. And what I'm going to do is call them in the order that we received them. And if there are any more general comments, now's a good time to bring them. I have several. What I'm going to do is read the first 3 names so that people can line up. We'll make good use of everyone's time, and then I'll call the next 3. So the first 3 are Russell Landon, David Schwagel, and Corey Lucero. So if the 3 of you would start, that would be great. We'll be beginning with Russell Landon from the Central California Irrigation District.
And the general public who is attending today, I thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Central California Irrigation District. I represent Central California Irrigation District, and a district that lies within our boundaries, Pozo Canal Company. The district consists of 143,000 acres, extending across Merced, Fresno, and Stanislaus counties. Its easterly boundaries meet the San Joaquin River. The district's interests are in the Los Banos area, stretching from Interstate Highway 5 to the San Joaquin River. We have 86 landowners which would be impacted by the 4 alternatives. The district has been working with these landowners to keep them informed of the routes of the 4 alternatives and communicating their concerns to the High-Speed Rail Authority. The district was first informed of the high-speed rail project when it was contacted by Parsons in 2009. Parsons came to us with questions and for information about our facilities and asked for our input on the project. We assured them that they had our full cooperation and offered our assistance to provide any information the district had. We have met They have met with us multiple times since the initial meeting. We began identifying the district's facilities and those of our landowners which would be impacted along the routes of the initial 3 alternatives and then the 4th. At this time, we are concentrating our efforts on the facilities and lands which will be occupied by the preferred alternative, number 4. Representatives of High Speed Rail Association contacted us around 2012. The district executed a contract with the High Speed Rail Authority on November 9th, 2016 for the San Jose to Merced section to assist High Speed Rail with their investigations. The first segment of this section would be from the San Jose to Carlucci Road. The district was informed that civil work east of Carlucci Road would not begin until civil plans were completed for this segment. The district area in this segment begins at Interstate Highway 5 on the west side, stretching east to Carlucci Road in the vicinity of Los Banos. Working in the Los Banos area with high-speed rail representatives such as David Spack and Gary Kernley and other staff associated with the rail development in our area has accomplished acceptable results through good communications. They keep us informed of the progress on studies, surveys, encroachments, construction, and rights-of-way. They have given us site tours, held regular agency meetings at which the district and other agencies could express their concerns and provide input. And they helped us form a technical working group, allowing us to participate in the civil planning process. In addition, the district, along with San Luis Canal Company and Merced County Farm Bureau, was successful in scheduling a private meeting based on our own agenda for the rail development to Carlucci Road. More than likely, this may not have happened if not for the working relationship we have with the high-speed rail representatives for our area. As mentioned before, the district boundaries meet the San Joaquin River. It has facilities, landowners between Carlucci Road and the San Joaquin River, which is the west end of the Y section. We have wanted to know when the civil design work for the Y section would begin so that we could be a participant in its technical working group. The district also delivers San Joaquin River respiration project waters and through their main dam in Mendota, California, and measures the flows on which the project orders. It was not until the EIR-EIS supplemental report for the Y released on September 13, 2019 that district learned the civil planning work for the Y section was so advanced. The district was not contacted by representatives for the Y section, nor were any of our landowners or other agencies contacted. Those who we have been working with knew the importance of a preliminary meeting and field tours, and that with the cooperation of the district, development would proceed smoothly. We discovered that the overcrossing at our Riverside Canal and San Joaquin River was designed for an overhead clearance of 16.5 feet and not a minimum 22.5 feet we had established with HSR representatives during field visits of our other canals west of Carlucci Road. When the district made the request of its area representatives to have the overhead clearance raised from 16.5 feet to 22.5 feet, the comment was copied to the project manager for the Y section. He returned his comments on our request, informing us that the clearance was based on Caltrans specifications. Higher clearance is needed to accommodate the activities of our cranes and excavators, but 22.5 feet was accepted although some limitations would be made. The project manager also commented that he would be happy to discuss the matter if the comment was made to the High-Speed Rail Authority on the civil plans for the Y section. The district did not comment on the civil information in its response to the EIS supplemental report because we were unable to participate in the technical working group's civil planning for the Y section on which we could base our comments. The district is requesting an immediate meeting with the representatives for the Y section to resolve this critical matter as soon as possible to minimize any added expenditures for this correction. Although we found no means to avoid the 22.5 feet clearance at our other canals, the district is willing to consider any alternatives high-speed rail suggests. The rail alignment is what it is, but civil planning is a relative factor when addressing local comments. We will continue to work in good faith throughout the development of the high-speed rail and strive to prepare ourselves and our landowners for its construction when it comes. Respectfully, Central California Irrigation District and Pozo Canal Company.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Landon, and I know your comments will be made available as part of the public testimony. Appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Schwagel first. And
Greetings, HSR Board. David Schwagel, Apex Civil Engineering, wishing you a happy National Engineers Week and a happy 10-year anniversary on the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, BC. The most ambitious transportation endeavor in Canada's history, getting a city ready for the Olympics that has severe traffic congestion, challenging topographic conditions, and no freeways. That is an ever-present reminder to us here in the NorCal and SoCal mega regions to be bold and ambitious, especially given that our SoCal mega region is going to be hosting an Olympics, breaking the nation's 26-year dry spell on hosting an Olympics. In order to make that happen, first, we need to watch the video from the California Alliance for Jobs that says, "Wimps didn't build California, dreamers did." That is an ever-present reminder of our roots. And second off, we need to really rally the troops and focus on the critical path that is before us. That critical path being construction package 2-3. Now, staff augmentation has been pitched as a potential solution. There are others, but what I really encourage us to do is take a razor-sharp focus on Selma. Get the best state, federal, international minds, and certainly invite Virgin Trains to be part of this discussion as well, and specifically focus on how can we deliver CP23 this year so that January 1st, 2021, we can start laying tracking systems, and that is going to get us on track for reaching Los Angeles in time for the Olympics. Finally, as a friendly reminder, Driving the Economy Forward with Infrastructure takes place Friday, April 3rd, 2020 at the Hilton Arden West, and we are hoping that you will all join in this exciting Challenge California conversation about getting California to achieve excellence in infrastructure investment. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Schwagel, and thank you for getting it right at 2 minutes. Much appreciated. Ms. Lucero, and then we have 3 other comments that I'd like to have people line up for this opening session, Mr. LeBrun, Mr. Treber, and Mr. Frazier. So go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Donza and the members of the authority. I am here bringing greetings from Interim Chancellor Nathan Brostrom, who was unable to be here today, but he felt it very important that we were here to represent our support. The University of California, Merced, strongly supports the Governor's plan and the High-Speed Rail Authority's policy recommendations to pursue a Merced-Fresno-Bakersfield interim operating segment with stops at Kings, Tulare, and Madera to provide high-speed rail service to Californians at the earliest possible time. UC Merced serves a student population, 99% of whom are Californians, representing every region and county of the state. Our students, their families, faculty, and staff travel for research and business, and all rail passengers in California will greatly benefit from reducing by 90 to 100 minutes their train travel between Southern California and the Sacramento and Bay Area regions in the north. The success of this early interim service is essential to implementing the eventual high-speed rail system between the Bay Area, Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, and Southern California. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lucero. Okay, Mr. LeBrun, followed by Mr. Treber and Mr. Frazier.
Good morning, directors. Thank you for the opportunity. I was wondering if the technology allows us to show slide 13 of Mr. Edge's report to the FNA. If not, I'll just read it out to you. It's Construction Package 1, CP1 overview, which shows a fixed bid price just below $1 billion and change orders in excess of $800 million. At the time this contract was awarded, there were multiple written and public testimonies coming to your predecessors, warning them of what was going to happen if you awarded that contract to Perini, just lowballing, and then, you know, we'll do change order later. But what really concerned me this morning is that Mr. Edges is now proposing to enter into exclusive negotiations with Tutu Perini to further extend CP1 to Merced, known as the North Extension. And quite frankly, at this point in time, my question to you is, what could possibly go wrong? The other thing I'd like to bring to your attention, let me just think, I want to talk about a different item. It's this issue of these hundreds of millions of dollars we're wasting on freight containment barriers. I'm going to put it very simply to you. If you have got a single dollar of freight containment barrier, it's a direct symptom of an incorrect alignment attempting to operate trains at over 125 miles an hour in a freight corridor. If you don't believe me, go and ask Virgin how many millions they're spending on freight containment barriers in the I-15 alignment between Victorville and Las Vegas. And last but not least, the people who were bidding against Parsons Brickhoff back in 2015, that's Bechtel, Arup, and Sistra, presented the exact same point to Mr. Vacker. Guess who won?
Thank you, Mr. LeBrun. Mr. Treber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Treber, I'm the Planning Director for Madera County. I just wanted to take a brief moment to thank the board and CEO Kelly, as well as Diana Gomez. We face a number of challenges in Madera, and certainly the start of the high-speed rail construction. And we've worked through a number of those. We still have a number of issues that are outstanding. So wanted to thank Diana and her team really in sitting down and working through a number of those situations. I did want to just come again and speak to our commitment in Madera of this project and this board and your staff in working through those complex issues. We're very interested in plugging in as the final environmental impact report is being prepared for the Y segment through the county, and also committed to just making sure high-speed rail maintains the investment and continues in the valley to see that to fruition as documented and aligned through the numerous meetings you've had. We are committed to working with your staff and this board. We have a number of opportunities, I think, within Madera to serve high-speed rail in a partnership on a number of the facilities and the operations of the system as a whole, such as, you know, your heavy maintenance and your maintenance away and operation centers. So we look forward to those continuing discussions, and just wanted to take this time and say thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Treber. Sorry for mispronouncing your name.
It's okay.
Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Chairman Mendoza. And actually, not only did you mispronounce his name, but he mispronounced his job. He got a promotion last week, so he's no longer the planning director. He's the chief of development services. I guess it's too new. We don't have the business cards yet for him, but just wanted to. Also want to thank your board for having these meetings. It's landed the last few times when we have our meetings in the evening, so I'm able to come here. But I do have to get back for the meeting, so I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I did listen to your directions, and so don't think I didn't think about it, but I'm going to talk about the business plan. And so I want to express strong support for the 2020 draft business plan and to move forward with the governor's proposal and staff's recommendations to pursue Merced, Madera, Fresno, Bakersfield. I'll throw Madera in there for us. Interim operating segment with additional stops at Kings, Tulare, and of course Madera. This will provide high-speed rail service to Californians at a much faster way. We talk about, what do we build first, and congratulations to you on your new baby and the new baby on the way. And the first thing, if those of us who've looked at, seen the early production, the first thing that grows is a backbone. You want to have that spine that goes so that you have a strong high-speed rail system, and you got to start with the backbone and staying with the Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield alignment. So thank you all for your time, your continued communication with Madera County, and appreciate your service.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Frazier, and we will take that as a general commentary since you needed to get back, but thank you for making the time.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Frazier is the county supervisor of Madera County.
Okay. Thank you, and appreciate you making the trek and heading back. Okay. Do we have any more public comments of a general nature?
Not for general.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will move on to item number 2, the ETO side-by-side analysis. And Mr. Vaca, please.
Good morning. I'm Frank Vaca, Chief of Rail Operations for the Authority, and beside me is Jorge Rios, Project Director, the lead for our early train operator, Deutsche Bahn USA. As our chairman indicated this morning, that this is the 4th presentation in a series that started in May of 2019. Originally, the Central Valley Corridor Interim Service Study and the Peninsula Interim Service Corridor Study was presented in that month. The board asked for some follow-on questions and added some scope to the evaluation, which then followed on with the qualitative side-by-side report that was presented in October to the board of 2019, which added Southern California alignment. This is the 4th and final evaluation of those studies, cumulative of those studies, which we call the quantitative side-by-side study, which includes the comparison of the Northern California Peninsula, Central Valley, and Southern California alignments, addressing the functional points that the board asked for, including service, revenue, ridership, environmental, and those elements that affect the benefits of each of those corridors. So to that, without any further ado here, I think Jorge can then present the final analysis of this study, and then we can take questions.
So thank you for the opportunity of presenting the findings of the study. Deutsche Bahn is doing the operation of one of the most complex networks in the world, and we know that this is not an easy task. So our project has also challenges in the funding. We have challenges with the environmental requirements. We have challenges, technical challenges with the alignments. So we know that this is not a pleasure cruise, and we hope that these studies that we have done in consultation with the authority and with the board could support your decision-making process for California. So I want to walk you quickly through the different reports and to the sequence of them and the scope of all these documents that we have already on the table.
So in May 2019, concurrent with the project update report, the ETO completed the analysis of the Central Valley study, which is between Merced and Bakersfield, and the Peninsula Corridor between San Francisco and Gilroy. The scope of these two studies was to compare ridership and revenue against operations and maintenance expenses in these two corridors. The findings in one hand, in the Central Valley showed that if we could extend the highest speed to Merced in the north, then we can have access to Sacramento, to the Bay Area in Oakland, and to the Silicon Valley in San Jose through ACE and San Joaquin regional services. In the other side, if we expand it to Bakersfield and we improve the bus connectivity, then we can have a seamless transfer to the regional services in the south of California. So the conclusion or the findings from the ridership model and from the O&M operations and maintenance cost model were showing in the Central Valley that we could not only improve the level of services to the community, but in the other hand, the numbers were showing that we could potentially improve the financial balance for the state of California for the combined corridor, meaning that we found out that there is a potential to reduce the level of subsidy that is required for these combined service. In the other hand, in the Peninsula study, we found out, or the numbers were showing that it is not attractive to run these higher speed service before we have the connection in the Pacheco Pass. The main reason for this is that the numbers showing that the additional ridership that was going to be generated by running these high-speed trains in this shared corridor were not enough to cover the additional operations and maintenance costs in this section. Again, this is under the assumption that the Pacheco Pass is not in place. There was a technical reason on it. Is remember that we are sharing the same tracks in this section with the regional services. So even that our high-speed trains will be capable to achieve higher speeds because of the limitations and the constraint of this shared corridor, we will not be able to differentiate our trains, our service, from the service of Caltrain, which by then will be highly improved through the electrification project that they are currently taking. So based on these findings, the authority made a recommendation, a policy recommendation to invest additional $4.8 billion in available funds to complete the 171 miles of the high-speed corridor between Merced and Bakersfield. Then 3 new studies were requested. The first one is the study that we are presenting today. This is what we call the ETO Side-By-Side. And the board of directors were willing to see a comparison not only on the ridership and revenue and the OPEX, but also including the CAPEX, including the greenhouse gas reduction benefits, including the requirements of additional investment and the congestion relief. So this study was done in 2 parts. The first part, which was the qualitative report, was presented last year, and today we are presenting the quantitative part, which is basically the output from these mathematical models that were representing the behavior of the passengers and the situation in the different corridors. The second study is what we call the KPMG business case. And the KPMG business case was focusing, reviewing the Prop 1A compliance, reviewing the potential business model that could be applied for this Central Valley service. It was reviewing the funding and the risks associated to the Central Valley early operations. Then, since KPMG did this business case, we, by instruction of the authority, we updated as well the Central Valley study, which is the first one that we did. And we, in this updated study, which is also available in the webpage of the authority, we review not only the connectivity, but we review also the infrastructure gaps that we could identify, like those that are required for having an intermodal station in Merced. But we have to change the strategy because there is a new business model that was proposed, so we have to reflect it in the Central Valley study. This study, the third one that I mentioned, the updated Central Valley, is not the scope of this presentation, but it is available already in the website. So before I enter into the details of the numbers, I would like to point out some important points to better understand the context of the study. Point number one, we focus this study in standalone corridors. The meaning of this is that the outputs of these models are going to be completely different to the models for Valley to Valley and Phase 1 when the three corridors are integrated. So when we are saying that there is a corridor that is attractive or not to run, we are saying it in the side-by-side study from the understanding that the three corridors are not connected. And this is important not to send the wrong message to the board. The second point is all these scenarios and all the assumptions in the side-by-side study were done by the ETO specifically for the purpose of this study. They do not represent any commitment or request from any of the stakeholders in the three corridors. So it was done just for the exercise of this study. The point number three, when we started this study, we found out that there are infinite possibilities of infrastructure scenarios, depending on how much money do we assume that we have available to invest in each one of the corridors. So we have to limit and we have to apply some constraints to be able to make it doable. So we basically put three major constraints, as I said, to limit the possibilities. The first one is that we assume that the highest speed money can only be invested in high speed infrastructure or in high speed trains. We did not assume, for example, that the high speed money could be used for procuring regional trains for Caltrains, or, for example, to invest in the zero emission fleet in the south of California. Neither do we assume that the money from California high speed could be invested outside of the alignment inside the Phase 1 scope of high speed. The second constraint that we use is we did not came with the idea that there was huge amount of additional available funds. So what we did is that we took the available business plans from the three regions, from the three corridors, and we reviewed the infrastructure projects that they already have there. And the last one, we assume that there is let's say, the potential of available funds from the authority of an order of magnitude of 4.8 billion to 5 billion. And this is important because if instead of assuming that there is that this is the available funds from the authority, then if we assume better, for example, to have 10 billion, then again we will be doing similar scenarios like the Valley to Valley, where we could potentially finish the Pacheco Pass. So there is also another limitation in the amount of money that we assume that is available from the authority. And the last point that I want to highlight before going into the numbers is that this study was focused on the change. We focus on the transformation that we can achieve with the additional investment of the money. So instead of looking at the total numbers, we were trying to compare and to identify what will be the change after investing or after the possibility of diverting this money from one corridor to the other one. So this was, as I said, the main focus and was one of the main questions that we were trying to answer.
As Jorge goes to the next slide, some refinements. The assumption on the constraints for the expenditure of the California high-speed rail funds is consistent with Prop 1A. So that constraint was was placed that way because of the law, the legislation, how our funding is approved. And the second constraint on the $4.8 billion is the actual available funds based on our budget and authority. So those constraints were boxed in and not assumed for just arbitrary reasons. They're legal reasons.
So we try to answer, slide number 4, we try to answer 3 main questions. Question number 1 is, what would be the impact of having high-speed trains in the 3 corridors? Question number 2 that we try to answer is, what will be the impact of additional investment in the 3 corridors to improve the regional services, even if we do not have high-speed trains running in these 3 corridors? And the last question that we tried to answer with this study was to identify where shall we continue, understanding that there is already a decision of doing the 119 miles in the Central Valley. So what we try to answer is the question, where can we create the biggest impact with the additional money? Shall we continue doing the extension to Merced and Bakersfield, or shall we start or continue the project in the north of California or in the south of California? So these were the 4 main questions that we tried to answer. So if we go to the next slide. For answering these questions, we define 4 scenarios. The first one is the current situation, and we use it only as a reference point. We use it just for the purpose of calibration of the mathematical models that we use in the study. But we did not use this one as a comparison. Then we have a scenario number 2, and a scenario number 2 is the ongoing, already funded projects. This is including the non-high-speed funds plus the high-speed bookends commitments to the corridors. And this is the one that we, let's say, we took it for granted, that this is the level of service that already is there, to compare it against the 2 other scenarios. And then we define a scenario number 3, which is investing additional high-speed money paired with regional money to improve the regional services without the high-speed trains. And a scenario number 4 is the remaining, or what we call the full-blown out investment for California for enabling the possibility of running the high-speed trains. So these are the four scenarios that we included into the study. Each one of the corridors, and I'm talking about the table of slide number 6, each one of the corridors has completely different characteristics. In the leftmost column of the table, we have the definition of the corridors. So we have in the north of California, the corridor is defined between San Francisco and Gilroy. In the Central Valley is between Merced and Bakersfield, and in the south of California is between Burbank and Anaheim. In the north of California, we have 77 miles shared with the regional services. In the Central Valley, we have 171 miles of dedicated high speed. In the south of California, between Burbank and Anaheim, we have 44 miles of shared infrastructure, shared corridor with regional service. The fact that that we have these 2 shared corridors is having an implication also on the benefits, as I mentioned before, that we can achieve with the high speed. Since in the north of California and in the south, we are running in the same pair of tracks that the regional services, our trains will not be able to achieve very different speed than what they are having. Also considering that we are stopping in less stations, while in the Central Valley is where we have this dedicated piece of 171 miles. Here is where we can actually achieve the 220 miles. These constraints then have impact on the, let's say, they have an impact on what can we achieve out of the additional investment. In the north of California and in the south of California, yes, we will increase the capacity, or this investment will be mainly achieving an improvement of the frequency and the capacity of these regional systems, while in the Central Valley, we will be achieving not only additional capacity, but we will have a major transformation in the travel time. When you bring these constraints into the mathematical models, then they are trying to reflect the willingness of a passenger to take one mode of transportation or the other one. So yes, a passenger will react to the additional frequency, but it will react even more to the reduction of the travel time. So basically, because of the constraints of the corridor, in the Central Valley, we have, let's say, double impact compared to the other two. Scenario 2, the projects, as I said, this is the ongoing funded project. So for the north of California, this is basically the electrification between San Francisco and San Jose, plus the additional Caltrain electric trains that are going to be running in this service. For the Central Valley, the ongoing projects is the Valley Rail project, which is currently undergoing in San Joaquin and Ace, plus the existing 119 miles that are being constructed or being built by the authority between Madera and Poplar, even that this is not operational, but they are already, we assume that they are already funded. In the south of California, Scenario 2, it's including the initial score investment plus Link US Phase A. And here, based on some information that we got from the south of California, we included as part of this scenario the conversion to the zero-emission vehicles. And we decided to put it into this scenario mainly for two reasons. The first one is that in Caltrain, we are going through an electrification project, so they will achieve a lot of greenhouse gas or environmental benefits. In the Central Valley, we have an electric train, which is also achieving these benefits. So to put the three corridors at the same level, we assume that the zero-emission vehicles, it's something that could be done as part of Scenario 2. The second reason why we put it there is because we did not assume, as I mentioned before, that the money from California High Speed could be used to fund these zero-emission vehicles. So there is not really a connection between when, in the south of California, we can initiate this conversion because it's not connected to the funds from California High Speed. For this one, even though we said that the Scenario 2 is the fully funded picture, this is not including the additional $5.1 billion that is going to be approximately required for changing the fleet in the south of California. Scenario number 3, in the north of California, is completing the electrification project between San Jose and Gilroy, plus the additional tracks that we need to build for the passenger service, plus the grade separations, plus the Diridon station, plus the additional rail system that we will need, plus more Caltrain electric trains. And remember that the Scenario 3 is not assuming that we will be running high-speed trains at this point of time. In the Central Valley, Scenario 3 is not applicable, and it's not applicable for two reasons. The first one is that the $4.8 billion that we are assuming will already bring the Central Valley from a Scenario 2 to full high speed. So it's jumping from a Scenario 2 to a Scenario 4. And also, the second reason why this Scenario 3 is not applicable in the Central Valley is that it's different from the other two corridors because we have a dedicated high-speed alignment. So we do not assume that the region, or meaning the ACE and San Joaquin, could invest in the high-speed corridor. Neither do we assume that the money from California High Speed could be invested north of Merced in the ACE and San Joaquin. So these Scenario 3, which in the other ones is the concurrent investment from the two sides, is not applicable in the Central Valley. Finally, in the south of California, Scenario 3, it's the addition of the 4 tracks between Burbank and LA Union Station, 4 tracks also from LA Union Station to Fullerton, plus the Link US Phase B, plus rail systems, plus additional regional trains. The funding in the north of California for scenario 3 will be roughly 20 billions, and in the south of California will be roughly 6.4, plus the budget that is going to be required for the zero-emission vehicle. Finally, scenario 4, this is the additional full-blown investment from California High Speed to enable the possibility of running the high-speed trains. So in the north of California, it will mean we will need the maintenance facilities for high speed. We will need the high-speed trains. We will need to do the modifications of the stations. We will need to do some curve straightening, and this is roughly 22.4 billion. In the Central Valley, scenario 4 is what we mentioned already, the extension to Merced and the extension to Bakersfield in the south, which is 4.8 billion, plus a regional investment that is going to be required to bring ACE and San Joaquin and create this intermodal station that we assume in the study. In the south of California, is the Burbank Airport Station, the Anaheim Station, plus the electrification, plus the modifications to the station, like maintenance facilities and the high-speed trains. And this is roughly 8.8 billion, again, plus the 5.1 that are going to be required for the zero-emission fleet. Slide number 7. Remember that I mentioned at the beginning that the focus of this study is in the change. Here in this slide is the only slide where we are showing the total numbers in the 3 corridors. So if you take a look to the top right chart, this is the annual ridership. And it's comparing the total annual ridership in the north of California, in the south of California, against the Central Valley. In the bottom, so to the left, you have the passenger miles traveled. And this is a combination of the number of passengers and the number of miles that each one of these passengers is traveling in the corridors. So in the other side, we have the fare box revenue, which is a combination of the number of passengers with how long they travel in the system. So yes, the total number of passengers and the total number of riderships of riders is bigger in the north of California and bigger in the south of California compared to the Central Valley. But this ridership, it's already there. So remember that what we are trying to measure is the change of investing the additional money and to see where it brings us. So it's not the total, but it's the change. And this is what we highlighted. If you take a look now to the change, in the 3 cases, the delta is bigger in the Central Valley compared to the other corridors. So if we go to the next slide, which is slide number 8, this slide is exactly the previous one, but just showing the difference. So here it's more evident when you see that, for example, the annual ridership, it's almost the increase in annual ridership after the investment. It's almost twice in the Central Valley compared to the other corridors. When you take a look to the passenger miles travel, which, as I said, is the combination between the number of passengers and the number of miles that they are traveling in the system, it's almost 3 times in the Central Valley compared to the other 2. And the fare box, it's almost 4 times in the Central Valley compared to the other 2 corridors. Slide number 9. This is congestion relief. The indicator, the performance indicator for measuring the congestion relief is what we call the vehicle miles traveled. These are the vehicle miles that we are taking out of the highways and bring them into the trains. They are closely, they are proportionally linked to the passenger miles, and because the passenger miles are bigger in the Central Valley, so we will be achieving a reduction of vehicle miles of almost 3 times in the Central Valley compared to the other corridors. In the bottom of the slide, we have the annual train miles and the passenger miles again. And I want here to highlight something which is a consequence of the constraints that we have in the other corridors. So in the bottom left, where we have the annual train miles, this is the change in the offer, in the service that we're bringing to the communities. So this is the additional service that we are going to achieve investing this additional money. In the right side, in the bottom, we have the passenger miles travel, and this is the demand. So if we take a look on the response of the demand to the additional offer, this is where we highlight that there is a higher efficiency on the additional service compared to the additional demand. And of course, this is then reflected as well in the fare box recovery ratio when we're increasing the service, but also having a bigger increase in the fare. Slide number 10. This is the greenhouse benefits. The changes again, it's that they are higher in the Central Valley, roughly 50,000 metric tons of CO2 compared to the other two corridors. And again, this is linked to the vehicle miles travel, which are taken out of the highway. In slide number 11, this additional service, of course, is coming with additional operations and maintenance expenses. So in this chart, the red bar is showing the operations and maintenance expenses in each one of the corridors and in each one of the scenarios. The blue bar is showing the fare box or the revenues coming out of the fare box. So we are pointing out the delta. Since the efficiency, as I mentioned before, is higher in the Central Valley, here is where we achieve the biggest reduction in subsidies. And I want also to highlight that this is not including the low carbon fuel standard credits. So that when we add it, the advantage of the Central Valley, it's even bigger, but we decided to take it out just that we can show the picture just of the fare box and not the low carbon fuel standard credits. Slide number 12. For achieving these benefits that we compare here, in all the corridors, we need the money from high speed, which is what we define as HSR eligible investment, but we need as well the money from the regions to achieve the benefit that we mentioned there. So in the north of California, for a scenario 3, we will need 3.5 billions in high-speed eligible investment. Sorry, 3.6, and they will need to be paired with around 70 millions of regional funds. For actually running high-speed trains in the north of California, then we will need not only the 4.8 from California high-speed, but we will need roughly 500 million more in eligible investment from high-speed, plus the same 17 that are going to be required from the regions. In the Central Valley, so we need the 4.8 from high-speed, plus we need again roughly 500 millions from the regions to complete the hub in Merced and the improvement of the connectivities in the north. In the south of California, for a scenario 3, we will need 4.5 billions from the authority, plus roughly 7 billions from the region. In a scenario 4, the 4.8 billions of the authority will not be enough. The authority will need to invest 2.1 in addition to the 4.8 to complete the high-speed investment, and again, we need these 7 additional billions from the regions. The 7 billions from the regions in the south of California, as I said, they are including the 5.1 for the zero-emission vehicles. So slide number 13 is just a summary of the findings. So ridership as I mentioned, is almost twice in the Central Valley compared to the other corridors. The greenhouse gas is 50,000 tons, more than in the other two corridors. The vehicle miles travel is almost 3 times in the Central Valley compared to the other ones. And we make also an analysis of the possibility of having high-speed trains running in the 3 corridors. So we believe that it is possible in the Central Valley, and we believe that it's possible in the north of California. We think that due to the complexity of the corridors, we will need more than 10 years to complete and to actually have high-speed trains in the south of California. So last slide with the conclusions. The scenario of having high-speed trains running between Merced and Bakersfield, connected together with ACE and San Joaquin in the north and improving the bus connectivity to the south of California, is bringing the greatest benefits in ridership, congestion relief, greenhouse gas reduction, operational expenses, and capital investment. These were the points that the authority requested us to measure, but also from the program, from the high-speed program point of view, only in the Central Valley, assuming again that we do not have the money to connect all the corridors, is where we are going to get the most for the available funding that we have. And it's also where we are going to have the biggest benefits in subsidy reduction. So I hope this is helpful, and we are open for any questions. The studies are published in the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do, if we can indulge the board, is to do the next presentation, so that we've got both of the contexts, and then we'll bring everyone back for Q&A, if that's okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you. Could we ask KPMG to come up and present the business case study? Thank you, Dan Feidelberg.
Chairman and members of the board, good morning. My name is Dan Feidelberg, and I'm a principal at KPMG's infrastructure advisory practice.
Speak a little.
Is this better? Sound check?
Yes.
Okay. In my remarks, I'll be presenting an overview of our recently completed study that focuses on the determination of a business case to run interim service within the Central Valley between the cities of Merced and Bakersfield. Thierry Prate, whom many of you have interacted with in the past, helped to lead this analysis, and he's traveling overseas to attend to a family matter, and is sorry he can't be with us here today. In preparing our report, KPMG examined a range of financial, construction, operational assumptions that have been used and generated by the authority over time. Accessing this information using a singular lens enabled our team to develop a set of recommendations and conclusions, as well as risk mitigation strategies for you to consider. So by its nature, this presentation was meant to be a high-level overview of the major themes, but the study is included in your materials, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So in May of last year, the authority adopted a project update report, which included a recommendation to run an interim service in the Central Valley prior to the completion of the Silicon Valley to Central Valley line. At that time, the authority's early train operator provided a summary of ridership, revenue, and operating assumptions related to the concept of launching the authority's high-speed rail assets as they are delivered. Following the adoption of that project update report, the board's Finance and Audit Committee asked KPMG to conduct an independent assessment of the opportunities, the challenges, and choices inherent in a proposed interim service. So our team examined the potential capital investment, the business model, the operating plan, and the potential regional impact. So I do want to point out that as a standalone assessment, this study was not designed to compare this proposed project against any other potential project. Rather, it uses the information generated to help develop conclusions for the board to consider and recommendations to mitigate some of the risks that could surface. So the proposal, the starting point for the analysis, of course, is based on the work already underway in the Central Valley segment between Madera and Poplar Avenue. The proposed interim service would expand the scope of the Central Valley segment in order to bridge the 31-mile gap between Madera and downtown Merced, in the 21-mile gap from Poplar Avenue to downtown Bakersfield. As envisioned, interim service would launch at the end of 2028, and then would connect to a range of multimodal transportation options in Merced that will connect travelers to locations throughout the San Joaquin Valley and in Northern California. One of those transportation options to which the line would connect is the proposed extension of the Altamont Commuter Express, or ACE train, which is indicated by the dotted purple line on the right-hand map, which has been mostly funded. As envisioned, the ACE train proposal would extend ACE to Merced. It would take advantage of the travel time savings that high-speed rail will offer travelers in the San Joaquin Valley by enabling an increase in service frequency between the San Joaquin Valley and the Silicon Valley. In examining the proposed interim service plan, our study outlines 10 conclusions. The first, shown here on the top left, is that the operation of interim service will not only utilize, but it will enable the maintenance of the capital asset. The resources that are already committed to building in the Central Valley will result in a large, tangible public works that will form the backbone of the high-speed rail system. But like all infrastructure investments, the project will have long-term maintenance obligations once the authority completes the construction of the civil works and its tracking systems. So to provide for maintenance, the authority plans to incorporate a long-term maintenance function into its tracking systems contract. However, it's important to note that the cap-and-trade program sunsets in 2030. So if trains do not run on the authority's tracks, there will be no revenue generated, and there will not be another ongoing fund source to pay for maintenance. The authority would then have created a stranded asset, and it will own the liability to maintain it, to secure it, and it will not have a funding source to do it. Hence, interim services acts as a mitigation strategy. The strategy is to use the asset and to develop the structure whereby the ridership contributes to the maintenance through the fare box. The next issue we reviewed was the affordability of the project, as shown on the top right. Here we compared the current projected cost to deliver the Merced to Bakersfield line to the availability of funding. Today, the current projected funding available for construction ranges from $20.6 billion to $23.4 billion. That amount includes all remaining Proposition 1A funds, federal Fiscal 10 funds, and a range based on the continuous appropriation of 25% of annual cap-and-trade program revenues. The low end of the range assumes that the authority will receive $500 million per year, and the high end of the range assumes the authority would receive $750 million per year through the program sunset in 2030. The funding for the project was compared to the authority's capital cost estimates, which are reported in the draft 2020 business plan. The current capital cost estimate for construction of the Merced to Bakersfield line is $20.4 billion. Therefore, based on the current estimates, the Merced to Bakersfield line is affordable. Given the narrow affordability margin, however, ensuring its affordability will be dependent on maintaining the critical path and effectively managing the capital risks related to construction. Next, in the lower left, we looked at the projected cost to operate interim service. The cost analysis was conducted by the early train operator, and they examined costs across Central Valley rail services, including ACE, high-speed rail, and the Amtrak San Joaquin service. And based on our review of that data, the projected cost to the state of California to support the current ACE and San Joaquin services would rise to approximately $83 million by the late 2020s. With the introduction of the proposed extension of ACE to Merced and the Merced-Bakersfield line, the fare box recovery ratio would improve, which would reduce annual state costs to $42 million at that point in time, which would be a benefit of $41 million. We can't conclude, though, that the standalone interim service would break even based on the revenue that it alone generates. However, the analysis suggests that the combination of high-speed travel time savings in the San Joaquin Valley, along with the connectivity to the ACE and San Joaquin services in Merced, boosts system-wide ridership significantly. As of 2017, nearly 3 million passengers accessed rail and bus services in the Central Valley. The ETO forecasts that without the development of interim services and the ACE extension to Merced, that ridership would increase to 4 million by 2029. And with the completion of the Merced to Bakersfield line and the associated regional rail improvements, ridership could be boosted to 8.8 million. So it's important to recognize that this proposal effectively envisions downtown Merced evolving into a mobility hub that interfaces with multiple rail services. Base case ridership forecasts and model runs indicate that a solution similar to what is depicted on the right side graphic would unlock significant projected increases in ridership. This includes the completed ACE extension, increases of capacity on the San Joaquins, converging in Merced at a cross-platform connection. The model, which projects the significant boost in ridership, results from significant travel time savings that high-speed rail unlocks in the San Joaquin Valley. In addition to the base case, the study includes stress tests based on different variations of what could occur. It found that, for example, if the extensions are completed by ACE and the authority, but that the cross-platform connection is not achieved, ridership would be lower than the base case. So in this scenario, the fare box recovery ratio would fall from 82% in the base case to 76% in the downside case. So that projected reduction in state operating costs would commensurately fall from a benefit of 41 million in the base case to a benefit of 25 million. In the most extreme scenario we looked at, where ACE does not extend to Merced, ridership would fall further. The fare box recovery ratio would only be about 51%, and state operating costs in that case would in fact rise. So it's with these financial scenarios in mind that we conclude in the left-hand blue box that the completion of regional rail improvements will be critical to unlocking the projected boost in ridership. But in addition, the study concludes that the development of interim service would require its own business model. As the authority progresses in its mission over the long term, it will eventually evolve from an organization focused on planning and delivery to a service provider. The authority will be able to manage and oversee an initial operating segment when revenue projections are equal to or greater than the costs of operating and maintaining the segment. Starting in the 2016 business plan, the authority projected and continues to project that it will transition to this service provider function upon completion of the Silicon Valley to Central Valley line. But in the meantime, as construction of civil works, track and systems, and rolling stock are delivered, the authority will have the responsibility to decide how it wants to utilize and maintain the assets. So instead of the authority operating the completed assets, it could serve as an infrastructure owner and lease the assets to a third party who would be best positioned to unlock the projected regional ridership benefits. So to accomplish that successfully, the authority, indicated in the blue box on the left, would have to seek out a regional rail partner who would lease the authority's assets and defray the funding obligations for maintenance and other management costs. In essence, the authority can pursue a partnership with state or regional agencies, such as the San Joaquin JPA, which would mitigate the risk the authority faces with regards to covering long-term payments for maintenance of its track and systems and rolling stock. It would help unlock the increased ridership in the region and would help reduce state rail operating costs. So this potential interim service business model is similar to business models deployed by other railroad infrastructure owners such as Union Pacific and BNSF. Currently, the railroads allow the San Joaquin JPA to utilize their infrastructure through track access agreements, which are represented on the right-hand side of this page. The concept for the potential interim service business model is to mirror the same structure, with the authority positioned as an infrastructure owner that will lease its assets and grant track access to a service provider. The authority would be accountable for the procurement and management of contracts with the providers of its track and systems and rolling stock. The terms and conditions of those contracts, including costs, would need to be passed through to the service provider in a back-to-back manner. The service provider would form and procure a single operating company that would run ACE, San Joaquin's, and high-speed rail services. The single operating company would collect fares from passengers, and then supplemental funding would be provided by the state, as it currently does, to continue by the state transportation agency. So in the end, the model is designed to ensure that the amounts paid to the authority under the lease would fully cover the authority's maintenance and management costs. So as a first step to develop a business model, the authority would need to identify those regional partners with the capacity to accept the terms of the track and systems contract currently under procurement and the potential future rolling stock contract. So we understand that the San Joaquin JPA and the California Transportation Agency are willing to be considered as potential partners. In parallel with the development of the business model, on the right-hand side, our study delineates risks that are inherent in the interim service model. The projected decline in state rail costs depends in part on managing and mitigating those interim service risks that are delineated in the report. They should be considered in the context of negotiating the back-to-back contracts with the service provider. Those risks include elements such as ensuring there are no delays in delivering the rail infrastructure, ensuring day-to-day operations serve passengers as expected, and that there's convenient connectivity with adjoining rail services. The report also delineates risks germane to the capital program. They include things like regulatory approvals, right-of-way acquisition, the timely availability of funding, contract management, cost escalation, schedule adherence, and the management of the interfaces between contracts for civil works, track and systems, and rolling stock. So finally, our review of the data and analysis indicates that the Merced to Bakersfield line will help the authority achieve its mobility, environmental, and economic goals. The mobility benefits were discussed earlier, and from an environmental standpoint, the ridership increases, which commensurately reduce vehicle miles traveled, which generate the environmental benefits were just discussed by the ETO. But from a financial standpoint, we examined whether the incremental capital costs necessary to enable interim service can generate a financial return. This question was analyzed in the context of adding the Merced extension into the Silicon Valley to Central Valley line. Since the Bakersfield extension had been previously incorporated into the financial analysis for the initial operating segment, we approached this question by considering the incremental net revenue that the extension would generate over and above that existing base case. So based on the data and taking account of the incremental capital costs, the current model suggests that the plan would generate a net present value operating benefit of between $500 million and $900 million through 2060. From an economic standpoint, we looked at the methodology of the economic model that has been used by the authority over time. The Merced to Bakersfield line is expected to generate approximately 160,000 job years of employment and nearly $38 billion in total economic activity. And that is significant in the context of the region's economy. The Bureau of Economic Analysis estimates that the gross domestic product for Merced, Madera, Fresno, and Bakersfield was $94 billion in 2017. So in other words, this project and the economic multipliers would generate about 5 months of economic output in the region. And perhaps more importantly, that would be impactful for small and disadvantaged businesses in the San Joaquin Valley who are projected to be allocated $3 to $4 billion of additional contracts moving forward. So based on the conclusions that we reached, we developed 5 recommendations for the authority to consider. The first is to move forward with steps to implement an interim service in order to mitigate the risk of creating unused stranded assets. Interim service will create a way for the authority to maintain the infrastructure. The obligations already exist, and in the absence of mitigating that issue, the authority risks taking on a depreciating asset that would impact the ability of the system to achieve its long-term expansion goals. The second recommendation is to begin the process of establishing a business model for interim service. This would include the development of a memorandum of understanding with state and regional partners prior to making long-term commitments and operating decisions with respect to the implementation of the interim service. The agreement should include commitments for developing the regional rail infrastructure up to and around the Merced station, and provide commitments to utilize and pay for the leased assets as they become available on a segment-by-segment basis. Next, we recommend that the authority secure access to remaining Proposition 1A funding as soon as the 2021-2022 fiscal year to increase certainty regarding the affordability of the capital program. Fourth, we note that one important lesson learned thus far is to ensure that the critical path preparatory work has been completed prior to engaging in new long-term contracts. In addition to negotiating the recommended MOU, this would include completing any contractual amendments necessary to allow for the delivery and acceptance of 5-mile section of civil works in alignment with the proposed track and systems contract, and completing the acquisition of the right-of-way for the Central Valley segment. And finally, we recommend that the respective extensions for Merced and to Bakersfield be advanced incrementally. Once certain milestones are reached and the project is incrementally de-risked. Those milestones include purchasing the necessary right-of-ways for the Bakersfield segment. This can begin already because the environmental clearances have been accepted. For Merced, the authority will need to first complete the environmental process, which is anticipated later this year. But it also includes de-risking components of the project prior to taking on significant additional risk, securing access to necessary fund sources, and validating the affordability of civil works and additional contracts for each segment. So with this in mind, we do believe it will be imprudent for the authority to periodically revisit and verify assumptions regarding capital costs, capital funding sources, estimated ridership, operating revenue, and to evaluate opportunities to mitigate risk. So that concludes the overview of our study, and hope our analysis and recommendations will be informative of your work, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. At this section, we only have 2 public comments, so I'm going to take those first, and then we'll do Q&A, and then from the board members, just so that we're efficient use of everybody's time. So Senator Hogan-Giorni, and then Mr. LeBrun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm here in support of the governor's vision to go ahead and complete the Merced to Bakersfield full alignment. I have long been a supporter of also giving money toward the Southern California alignments, and have a long history of spending a lot of time in Southern California, particularly when it was raised that it was possible to build the high-speed rail alignment within the existing alignment of Metrolink. I also would fully advocate for extending cap and trade beyond 2030 so that we have the additional ability to work toward those goals. But today I am here in support of the Merced to Bakersfield alignment. It has long been envisioned since 2010. I've been advocating for extending up to Merced, where the line could connect with the ACE system, which carries commuters into the Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. Today, over 150,000 individuals are commuting over the Altamont, and that largely includes a large population from this section, Merced to Bakersfield. One subject that I want to draw to your attention that I've been discussing with my colleagues in the legislature is that this isn't just a transportation plan. This is part of the solution for affordable housing. Since the late 1990s, the legislature has been discussing the problem of the jobs housing balance. And there was an effort at that time to try to incentivize more building of homes in jobs-rich areas and more building of companies bringing jobs in housing-rich areas. And then the economy declined, and those incentives that we hoped to bring about in the budget went away. So we have continued to have the growth of jobs in the Bay Area and the Silicon Valley, and thus individuals have continued to move to the Central Valley in search of affordable housing. So while the legislature passed a bond measure and placed it on the ballot that the voters approved in 2016 for $4 billion in affordable housing, I'm asking you to remember my constituents, who are the workers who drive the economy in the Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. They are the workers who were realistic that they didn't have the means to afford homes where they work. So they were realistic and bought their homes in the Central Valley and chose for the trade-off for spending up to 3 hours, 6 hours each day commuting to their job. So while the state is investing $4 billion in affordable housing, I'm asking us to remember that high-speed rail in the Central Valley is also an investment in affordable housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Hogan-Giorni. Mr. LeBrun, and then we will go to Q&A from the board members on this section.
Other directors, thank you again for the opportunity. I'm not questioning the validity of the models, but one thing I've got issue with is when somehow the input to the models is being manipulated. And I'm going to give you two examples. It's ridership and costs. These models is basically taking Caltrain ridership, which is quite idiotic. You're basically looking at job and housing density within 2 miles of a station. Well, south of San Jose doesn't work like that, because the first thing you're going to hit is something called Coyote Valley. Guess what? It's a preservation area. And then it just carries on and it just goes down. But if you take a completely different approach and you think about the corridor between San Jose and Gilroy essentially being a funnel, it's a funnel for 5 counties. It's Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, and even Fresno and Merced. What we're seeing there on Highway 101 is in excess of 120,000 single occupant vehicles going up into Silicon Valley and back in the evening. So if you add them up, you end up with 250,000. Now, when you start looking at that from that point of view, and I say, well, what a tremendous opportunity. What if you could just grab, 10%, maybe 25,000 riders a day out of that? You're now going to look at the issue of costs, and you end up with something very similar to what KPMG are proposing. We actually started looking at when Deutsche Bahn provided a CapEx report to legislature last year. And if you now start thinking of Caltrain, just like Deutsche Bahn says, 8 high-speed trains, you're actually going to find out these trains are cheaper than what Caltrain is currently buying from Switzerland, Utah, and God knows Norway. And these trains will actually be manufactured either in Sacramento or in Pittsburgh, California. And you're going to see at that point what the benefit is, but we're not asking you for your money. We're asking for your support. Make it possible for us to do this, operate these trains, and show what we can do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LeBron. That was the conclusion of the public comment for items number 2 and 3, and now we'll go to board questions or comments. Anyone? Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Danny.
I'd like to get settled here. There's so much coming at us in these reports that it's actually hard for me to frame a couple of questions. So I want to ask a couple of factual issues.
Speak into the mic, Dan.
I'll try. So I think on the side-by-side presentation, we were looking at the costs for, I'm just going to use scenario 4, and they have $22.4 billion for Northern California and $8.8 billion for Southern California and $5.3 billion for the Central Valley. I don't think they include the regional investment portion of that. Is the assumption that we're going to pay for all of those costs?
Yeah. So slide number 12. In this slide, we're showing what we define as highest speed eligible investment compared to the regional funds. So the blue part is the investment that has to be done by California High Speed, and the orange is the investment that has to be done by the regions. We did not define who in the region is doing the investment, but it's the additional money.
So where did the number come from, like, that is required by high-speed rail?
It comes out of our the authorities calculation of the capital investment that is going to be required for the highest speed infrastructure in each one of the corridors.
So what is that what is that infrastructure in each one of the corridors? Isn't it the basic track?
No, each of the corridors, if you look at our 2020 business plans, you get the attachment on all the estimates for each of the construction, for each of the phases. These numbers come from each of those segments in the estimate for completion of phase 1. So it's the full operational needs.
One meaning the track the electrification, the trains, the maintenance yards, et cetera, et cetera?
Right, for high-speed rail service.
Right. Okay, so what I'm interested, as you've probably heard in the past, what can we do with the money we have? This is sort of an example of how much it's going to cost at the end of the process when we're up and running. It's sort of a little baffling to me. I know there's a lot of investment in other areas, and my concern is it's kind of comparing it to, here's the total cost, and we don't have the money now, but if there's a lot of money being invested by the other areas that we're looking at or possibly looking at, those total costs won't be quite the same. If we just invested in basic track and combined our resources leveraged our resources with other local funds or even private funds, these numbers wouldn't be exactly accurate, would they? Wouldn't they be less if we had partners who were working on those same areas that we're working on?
No. This assumes,
hold on.
no, but to answer the question, this assumes that you get the partnership investment to achieve the mobility benefits in the corridor. In other words, the investment that's proposed here would take the divertible amount of high-speed rail money as defined and would require regional investments of a certain magnitude to get the mobility benefit in that corridor. That's the assumption of the side-by-side. And so the side-by-side assumes that there is a regional investment in some of this as well, because it's not just what we could put in. That wouldn't be enough. We could put in what we put in, but you've got to have the regional investment as well to make it work. For example, in the Central Valley, we have to have the $500 million to make the Merced connection work. In Southern California,
$500 million?
You have to have additional investments. For example, if they want to do their ZEV trains, they have to invest in their ZEV trains, or other investments in the corridor that would match the money we would put, so you get the mobility investments assumed in that corridor. So the comparison here is how much do you need collectively to get the mobility benefits in each corridor?
I think I understand the collective portion of it, but I'm not sure I understand the breakdown here that there's three colors here, two blues, there's a slice blue.
Which page you on, Danny? Just so.
I don't know, 12.
12.
I'm not sure where those numbers come from. Collectively, let's say scenario 4, and I'm not even sure what area, Southern California. Where was that sorted out that our investment would be so much? And I'm almost sorry for focusing on Southern California because that's not really my intent here. How did these differentiations get sorted out? That we would be looking at almost $7 billion. Is that on a matching fund basis?
The high-speed rail authority dollars, the 4.8 and the 2.15,
Yeah.
correlate to the authority's estimate for that segment of work. So if you go to our business plan and to the estimate for phase 1, and you look for the capital investment that we are estimating for phase 1 between Burbank and Anaheim, it will be 6.9.
Okay, almost $7 billion, right?
Right.
So then you're assuming $7 billion investment from Southern California for what?
To meet the business plan and the benefits that was defined in this report. The
The
regional
benefits of connectivity or just actually on our route?
That's
on
right.
our corridor?
Burbank to Anaheim was studied as part of the 44 miles identified for Southern California, Burbank to Anaheim. So all of the discussion, all of the numbers in this report reflect Burbank to Anaheim, 44 miles, and the incremental benefit that can be achieved between the existing service and the two future scenarios that were studied.
Okay, so I'm looking at the business plan, and it shows about $5 billion for Burbank to Anaheim. Capital costs, estimated completion, or no, that's for the environmentals.
Yes, you're right. 5.1 billion, and it excludes our rolling stock.
That's correct.
Okay, so 14 billion versus 5 billion. You want to explain that to me?
Again, this is a comparison of the benefits, the change in the investment, the study was based on what can be benefited by our $4.8 billion investment in Southern California. Just our $4.8 billion brings no significant change, not enough change to bring any benefit. You have to have the regional investments combined with our $4.8 billion in order to achieve the benefits that were described here.
So, okay, I understand what you're saying, but I understand the conclusion, because if it's a $5 billion investment to build from Burbank to Anaheim, and again, I feel like I'm focusing on this inappropriately in terms of the geography, that doesn't assume that we're going to pay all of that. At least in my mind, my assumption would be these are our partners. They want to build this as much as we do, and that we could have, I don't know what the proper word, leveraging funds is always the way I've looked at it, but we could co-invest with our partners there and somehow manage to get to $5 billion without us spending $5 billion.
That would not bring the benefits as is envisioned by that regional area. Their business plan and their
Complete benefits for a complete
capacity
system.
and increased
Right.
all those benefits.
But
So
it
you
would bring
couldn't
benefits. I mean, if we complete that track and they invest in zero-emission vehicles that go 110 miles an hour, there are a variety of benefits associated with that.
And,
Right.
and that was part of the study that shows it doesn't come close to the benefits that are achieved in Central California, CVS. I mean, that's the basis of the study.
Okay.
But I think the premise, just to try to help here, is that, as Danny just said, it requires an investment at the local level to get the operational benefit that you need. So even if you diverted $4.8 billion of our funds and invested in the region, it needs to be matched by regional funds to get the mobility benefits you want. Stated another way, in scenario 2, assumes all the money the state of California outside of high-speed rail, except for our bookend monies, but the monies that the state agency, for example, is providing to operators down there. Scenario 2 assumes what they can achieve with those dollars. And then when you jump to scenario 4, it assumes additional mobility benefits that they can achieve if they invest local monies with the capital investments we would make of our monies. So maybe another way to think about this is an attempt to be helpful. Metrolink put out a white paper a couple months ago, and their white paper said if you diverted funds from high-speed rail to the LA region, here's a series of operational benefits we would hope to achieve. But that required essentially the same amount of money as you could divert. So the point is, the study is money you can make, capital investments you could make in the region with diverted money, plus regional investments that they have to make to achieve their mobility objectives. In the case of the Metrolink white paper, it was about a $10 billion investment. We don't have $10 billion to divert, so they would have to find $5 billion somewhere else. And so that's the comparison they tried to make here, is what's the collective investment in each region to get the mobility, environmental, and congestion benefits.
Okay.
Yes, it's public. I think we made it available on our website, but we can certainly get you a copy of it. Absolutely.
Danny, did that answer your question, or do you have other ones or comments too?
Well, I'm having all kinds of questions, but they're hard to connect because the presentation was so long. So let me
Go ahead.
ahead.
Did you add-
I'll come back to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ernie.
I'm glad that you asked all the technical questions about dollars, but I'm going to ask a more basic question. I'm wondering how you came up with this comparison when it looks like you changed our motion. The motion that I made was a comparison of ridership revenues, greenhouse gas savings, congestion relief, near-term benefits, and potential for private investment or local matching funds. I've not heard, I mean, you talked about the ridership performance measured by the highest increase in annual passenger miles or the PMT. That was not our motion. And I don't understand how you had the ability to change the motion to satisfy an answer that you posed a question for. I don't understand that. The congestion relief, you use the same type of comparison. Greenhouse gas and how you measure that, I'm not sure how, I know the conclusion you came to, but I certainly don't know the mechanism that you used for coming up with that. And this is probably more relating to the ETO the ETO has provided, or maybe to KPMG, you took unverified numbers and made your assumptions off of that. And I mean, this is, and I think that in the report here, it states that there was not verified numbers, it was assumptions. And there's a lot of what ifs. So, you know, maybe if you could help me understand how you took that motion and moved forward without at least letting us know what you're doing.
We used industry standards for the greenhouse gas evaluations for the vehicle miles that were transferred. We used the same formulas that are used in our environmental documents for these categories in terms of their application. So if we missed the mark on some specific question, I apologize, but we approached this from an industry perspective to address each of the questions in each of those areas. We used the latest and best information that was available publicly, and that information that would be provided by the regional areas that they could provide to us. So other than that, I don't know if we could have gotten any other information regarding the regional business plans, insight, white papers, and face-to-face communications. I don't know of any other approach that we could have taken. We certainly did not,
Frank, in some of your analysis, it's referred to as ridership revenues, and then you use this as a definition that you use to make this comparison by. And I just don't understand. They aren't interchangeable. They're completely different.
They're actually related because we set the fares based on their existing fares, and then the ridership varies the revenue fare box. This is strictly a fare box analysis. We're not talking about ancillary revenue, outside revenue of any other sort. So they are actually very directly related since they're multipliers of each other. And so therefore, since we fixed the fares based on existing fares, the ridership then generates the revenue, fare box revenue.
All right. The ETO report on its page 13 of 128 says, conclusion from the additional studies. And the last paragraph, it talks about the ETO side-by-side study concluded that the Merced-Bakersfield line CVS scenario number 4 yields the greatest benefits compared to the other two corridors related to the following concerns. Ridership performance, measured by the highest increase in annual passenger miles traveled to PTM. Congestion relief, the same answer. So I'm really specifically asking about that.
So if we go back to page to slide number 7, this one. If you take a look to a scenario 1, in the north of California, we have close to 25 million passengers already. Scenario 1 is what it's already there. So you don't need to do anything to achieve it. It's there. In the south of California, you have close, in a scenario 1, remember that this is just a picture of what you have there. It's close to 15 million passengers. Again, you don't have to do anything to achieve this. So the focus, maybe this is the misunderstanding, the focus that we put on this is, okay, this is what we have. What is going to happen if we invest the additional 4.8 pair with regional investment? And this is why we try to, we understand this as a transformation project of something that is already there. This is the reason why we include in this page the total values to make it evident that for these almost 25 in the north of California and almost 50 million in the south of California, it's something that you already have. You don't need to do anything because they are already there. So I don't know if this answered the question, but as I said, our understanding of the task, of the motion of the board was to measure what would be the change, what would be the impact of diverting the money from one corridor to the other one.
I mean, this is the first time I've seen this comparison, I mean, when I read this report, and it's not similar to what the motion that was passed. At least I don't see it as such.
Can I ask you to explain what you mean by that? What was the motion?
Well, the motion was, and I have it here, it's, there should be an analysis of the LA corridor, Bay Area, Central Valley, by a side-by-side comparison. Only after that analysis should a decision be made as to where best use of the funds were. We would compare ridership revenues, greenhouse gas savings, congestion relief, near-term benefits, and potential for private investment by local local matching funds. That was the motion.
Okay. I think that's what the analysis they did, but if you have a different opinion, I'd welcome it.
Well, what they're making, rather than revenue fare box, what they're doing is taking the annual passenger miles traveled, which is completely different than, it may yield the same at some point, but you're saying because they traveled a longer period of time that it yields more? No. Where are we getting, I mean, I looked at the analysis and we looked at the Merced numbers, and Merced numbers yields very favorably. We got 0 numbers out of the Bakersfield area, so I don't quite understand how we're making this comparison.
You question because of the annual ridership, because the models don't drill down to a daily or hourly service in terms to evaluate models. This is done on an annual basis, and it also rounds out those, the holidays, the weekends, the work days. So annual ridership is an appropriate measure to compare each service with. So again, that's a standard used in the industry. All of these charts reflect what the standard uses internationally in terms of evaluating, comparing different services. Annual ridership, revenue based on ridership, the fare box recovery, the vehicle miles, all of those we tried to use industry standards, not just rail industry, but environmental standards to reach those comparisons in order to be fair in terms of, side by side, as it was indicated and asked by the board, comparisons for each of those areas. I apologize if we missed something, but
I realize the complexity of trying to analyze them, because you're analyzing in some cases apples with bananas. I get that, but this is the ridership revenues from the fare box is much. I have to believe that it's much greater in the Los Angeles area than it is out of Bakersfield. The congestion relief, and this has been well published, that the greatest congested area is that LA corridor in the country. So when you start to look at those things, how do we say that it isn't?
Two key focuses, two key areas. One, this is the change based on the investment. So this is not the total absolute value of the numbers aggregate at the end, but the change as a result of the investment. Two, what the study showed is that by increasing the infrastructure both in Southern California and Northern California, that basically you have a closed system. You're not bringing in any new riders, any new people from outside the system until you connect those 3 regions through the high-speed rail. As such, you're trying to convert rail, car riders today to rail riders, and you're doing that by increasing your service and the capacity. However, you're not changing their trip time or adding that extra benefit for them to really make that jump. And the models that are, again, used across the state today, we use the same models. We use the state model, shows that until you take that capacity improvement and add some trip time savings or some other benefit, those are the numbers that you actually get crossing over at this point in Northern and Southern California.
Okay. Martha? Senator Scudia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, a lot of you know me as a former state senator, but the ones that really know me know that I am a girl from East Los Angeles that grew up in front of the largest freeway interchange in the country. And it still is, the East LA Freeway Interchange, which means I'm used to absorbing toxins. I don't want to know what my lungs look like. But for me, the biggest issue will be the environmental aspect of this program. And I will have to, apologize ahead of time because I have not had a chance to review all this stuff as a result of a car accident that I got into. But having said that, the little that I reviewed was so difficult, and I don't consider myself a dumb person. It was so difficult to understand. It's not user-friendly. So I really would hope that somehow we translate this language into a way that the public can better understand. But my question to you, sir, is I just want to make sure that what Mr. Camacho was indicating was that some of this data and some of these charts run contrary to our intuition They run contrary to our experiences. And I would like to take you back to page 45 of your study, in which you talk about the evaluation of greenhouse gas benefits. And it says here that in the first sentence that you use some type of a tool called the TIRCP GHG analysis tool with a footnote number 2 that it's some type of a quantification methodology used by, I guess, transportation agencies. I don't know what that tool is. I don't know what that tool studies. I don't know what that tool takes into consideration. But it says that here that it was based on every scenario describing the type of train miles provided as well as the reduction in vehicle miles traveled. Now, I understand, I think also one of your conclusions was that the more investments you make in high-speed rail, obviously the greater the benefit, we will see. And obviously, I'm coming late into this game. Some of my colleagues here have been in high-speed rail discussions for more than 10 or 15 years. So I'm the new kid on the block, but I do understand intuitively that the more investments you make, the more benefits you will receive. And obviously, the propositions gave, the initial investments to be made in the Central Valley. I understand that. My concern is that I want to understand what the baselines are, because I believe that baselines are different depending on where you're at. My baseline in terms of greenhouse gas emissions living in front of the East LA freeway is probably different from the baseline of somebody who lives in the west side along the coast, or probably different from the baseline of someone who absorbs the toxins as a result of agricultural industry in the Central Valley. I get that. So my question to you is, because I just want to make sure that we compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges. And I don't want to compare like, oh, it's almost close to this, but not really. I really want to see if we can develop as close as possible a comparison based on apples to apples. A comparison based, I know that you go by scenarios, and those scenarios include geographic distinctions. I understand that. But for some reason, I do believe that if the baseline of, say, greenhouse gas emissions, say in the Central Valley, was high to begin with, and I'm assuming because of its agricultural nature and the toxins that are emitted into the air, obviously any reduction in that area is going to be huge. But however, in the South, we may not have, in certain parts of the South, the toxins emanated as a result of an agricultural industry, but we do have toxins of a different kind. So I just want to make sure that we identify what the baselines are, so that when you conclude that the best scenario was scenario 4 of the Central Valley segment, that I just want to make sure that the baselines are accurate, and that we take into consideration the different geographic considerations which result in different greenhouse gas emissions results. And I apologize ahead of time for being the girl from East LA, but I have been subjected to environmental racism for my lifetime, and it is something that I will continue to fight till the day I die.
Thank you, Senator Scudia. I'm going to let them answer, but first, no need to apologize. We will have plenty of time to go through this in great detail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And on an ongoing public basis. That's why we're doing this analytics. And so I appreciate you joining the board, and we will make sure that you have the detailed go through in time to do that before we have to take a vote.
Yes, and I understand, Mr. Chairman, that the purpose of this, that's why it's high speed, that's why it's electrified. The purpose is to reduce our, greenhouse gases, our toxins and everything. I understand that, as well as trying to get from one point to another in a faster method. But for me, it's the environmental benefit, and that's where I really would love to be, maybe at another time. I don't want to take up too much of the time here, but really I would like to feel comfortable as to how you came to these conclusions.
Okay, thank you.
And just to address your specific question on the environmental issue, our environmental documents would create a baseline of the existing greenhouse gas effect in the environment in each segment and do their analysis through the environmental documents. Our study here is directly related to the amount of greenhouse gases that we stop producing by transferring vehicles travel to electrified clean train service. So therefore, it's irrespective of the region that you're in, whether you're in Northern California, Central Valley, or Southern California, based on the baseline of what existing, this is what will be transferred over, saved as a result of the electrified service. So it's consistent.
Wouldn't that be the same in all regions? I mean, in all different scenarios?
Based on the service, based on the VMTs, the amount of vehicles that we eliminate or take off. So that is a fair comparison across all regions based on the same basis fundamental comparison on the service that's provided and the amount of additional ridership that we take off of the roads. So that's consistent and fair across all regions.
So you're saying that there are two different types of analysis? I think you started off first with an environmental analysis, and then you said something about about train miles provided and vehicle miles diverted. Are you saying there are two different types of analysis here?
They're different. They're different. This is telling you what we would remove, the vehicles we would remove off the highways. The other analysis in our environmental documents deals with the existing conditions and based what would be incurred through construction, through the operating services, through vehicles that you had on maintenance, through all of the entire impact of the high-speed rail program. So it's an entirely different analysis. One is very specific on the environment. The other one is very specific on what greenhouse gases we would eliminate based on the additional ridership.
Can I see a copy of that document dealing with the environmental analysis?
So it's being completed. It'll be probably next year before it's completed for that segment.
Next year, and yet we're making decisions. I mean, I want to make a decision based on the environmental impact.
Right. So I want to try to help here. This side-by-side was a request to look at the benefits of investments in 3 distinct corridors and what the impacts were those on a mobility basis, on a congestion relief basis, on a environmental basis. If the request, I think what I hear the senator asking for is the request is to show her the baseline that you assumed in each corridor and how you defined the benefit, the environmental benefit in each corridor, and the comparisons you made to reach a conclusion that the 4 scenario in the Central Valley yielded the greatest benefit. So what I would suggest here is that data be put together and we share it with Senator Scutia. The environmental documents are a broader and different analysis that we do on each segment as we develop this project statewide that are not germane specifically to the side-by-side analysis that was requested in this case. But I think what we can get you is the baseline assumptions and the results on each corridor that we can show you that comparison on.
I would greatly appreciate that, Brian. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the end of my questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Assemblyman Arambla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and if I could just start by congratulating you as well on your granddaughter. For Senator Scutia, I just also want to welcome you to this board and recognize that you have been an environmental justice warrior for a long time and appreciate your voice on this issue. I do want to explain a little bit about where I'm raising my daughters, if I could, to help to frame where I believe my comments will go. For I come from 93728, which is one of the most environmentally and economically disadvantaged communities in the entire state. It's the same zip code in which I grew up in, and I'm raising my 3 daughters now. Every day we struggle to be able to access clean air, and we have some of the dirtiest air in the entire country. And so I question the discussion that talks about placing diesel instead of electric in my community, and how important it is for all of our children to be able to have access to clean air. But I wanted to express something that I thought was contrary to my experience living in the Valley, which is all of our air issues are not related to agriculture, but are also transportation related. We have a significant number of cars which are traveling great distances because of the rural nature of our community. And so I do appreciate the discussion about vehicle miles traveled and the final conclusion, which is that there are lower metric tons of CO2 being emitted into our air. Coming from that area, I believe that was actually the intent of what cap and trade was to do, was to lower the amount of CO2 which is into our communities. And so I just want to appreciate what is a complex subject matter and really will require many of us to dig in fully, but must bring my voice as well to something that's awfully difficult. You know, I could move from my community, but I won't. I could live in a different zip code, but I don't. And I'm raising my daughters there, trying to figure out how to build the first high-speed rail in America. And I fundamentally believe it includes us making real visionary investments into communities to help us with our disadvantages. Finally, if I could, there was a study that came out last week, just to bring it full circle, by Brandeis, which looked at a child opportunity index. And the lowest two performing metro areas in America was Bakersfield and Fresno. You're helping us to connect communities where our children need opportunities to succeed as well. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership and for the presentation here today.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a couple more questions if we have them, and then I do want to make sure we get to the business plan, and then we will have public comment after that. So Dan.
Okay, a couple of questions. Thank you, Assemblyman Arambula, for those comments. They're important. And I don't, as for myself, I'm not interested in removing any of the economic opportunity in the Central Valley, or in fact, I don't think any of the emissions reductions issues really. It is a question of how we spend our money wisely, how we have the most impact. I think it's safe to say that wherever we invest our money on our corridor, it's going to bring economic improvement, transportation improvement, connectivity improvement, air quality improvement. My concern is that we do it the most benefit for the most of the state while we prepare to build a high-speed train. It's been made obvious by some of the comments and all the reports that we really are not ready to do the kind of thing we need to do with high-speed rail until we get the ability to build tunnels. And that is a very fundamental question. If we're going to really have an impact, we have to find the money to build tunnels. So let me start with that premise. But I do want to ask about the business case a little bit, because it really leads me to the point I want to make. I'm looking at page 57. In fact, I basically made a copy of it. I'm assuming, Dan, your analysis was primarily financial and compared to the existing service in that corridor?
Yes.
So that the plan that more or less is being laid out would vastly improve that, and I don't disagree with that. I have some concerns with that being the plan that's been laid out because I think it's ahead of the board. I know this is a plan that is being proposed for board approval, and it hasn't been actually accepted by the board yet. And I'm looking at page 49 of the business plan. I actually agree with all the first three bullets. It's the third three bullets that basically outline the plan that hasn't quite been approved yet. So I wanted to ask you about this risk analysis. It seems fundamentally based on that we have a usable segment, the 119, which I believe in your remarks you made it clear that this is a big risk that we must mitigate by completing, essentially. And then the question becomes, after we've completed it, are we going to use it? So in this page, the mitigation for that jumps to a place where I don't believe the board has approved yet, and that's why I want to bring it up, that we build the tracking systems and high-speed vehicle procurement so that we are electrified with electric trains. That's the mitigation to make it a utilizable segment. I don't think that's the only mitigation out there, and I'll get to that in a minute. So that leads to a long chain here, which I find interesting, a little bit confusing, but I want to go down to you didn't look at any other plans that might be possible in the Central Valley to make that a utilizable segment, I'm assuming.
We focused on the electrification of high-speed service as laid out in the ETO study.
So it's my contention, and I will get to the emissions question because it's an important one. It's my contention that there is another way to do this that will get similar or better travel service in terms of time on a train can be done years earlier than the 2029 deadline we're looking at, perhaps 2025, and will provide a one-seat ride, which is the gold standard for transportation if you want to build ridership. In fact, it's my understanding that people will put up with longer trains if they don't have to get off of them, or longer transportation systems, period, if they don't have to get off of them and change trains. But what we're looking at is a high-speed train from Bakersfield to Merced versus another option, which I'll get to in a second. This is an important difference. If you're traveling from Bakersfield to Merced, what we keep reading is it's a 90-minute difference. Well, yes, that's compared to today. But there's also improvements that could be made and are being made as we speak in our partners in the ACE train, and I'm not sure about the San Joaquins, but certainly I understand they're purchasing high-speed, low-emission diesel that can do 120 miles an hour. So that would be the comparison I would like to see, what a high-speed train from Bakersfield to Merced would be in comparison on the timeline, and the same for Fresno and Merced. I would assume the difference there would be 15 to 20 minutes on these two differences. And I also want to point out that these high-speed, low-emission vehicles reduce emissions, existing emissions, by 85%. And I know it's not complete, but it's substantial. And if you end up getting better ridership because it's a one-seat ride to the destination you're going to, which I would take some exception to Senator Galgiani's statement about Bakersfield people traveling over the mountain to San Jose. I don't think you're going to find a lot of ridership there. But I believe that you will add more ridership on a one-seat ride than you will on a higher speed train to a destination where you have to get off. Now, I don't know if we've studied that or we can study that, but it is, as you said, Senator, it's just intuitive. So I want to get to the point on the emissions first, because it's really an important point. And the little bit of research I've done on this, according to the San Joaquin Basin Air Quality Management District, passenger trains are responsible for about 1/3 of 1% of NOx emissions in the valley. 1/3 of 1% passenger trains. Those are existing diesel trains. And about 1/200th of 1% of particulate matter in the valley. That's not a lot. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. Now, if we have an electric train, that goes to 0. But if we have a new high-speed, low-emission diesel train, you reduce that 1/3 of 1% by 85%. And the same for the 1/200th of a percent for particulate matter. That means you have reduced dramatically. And I take exception, and I want to find out, there's on page 20 in the business plan, the way it's portrayed, Tier 4 diesel train running service in the state would emit about 6,500 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Now, I'm not sure what the range of that is, but a high-speed train would reduce, electric train would reduce this emissions by 416,000 metric tons. One way of saying that is Tier 4 diesel would add 6,500 metric tons compared to the high-speed train. Another way of saying that would be Tier 4 diesel would reduce by 400,000, essentially 409,500 metric tons. It's only a slight, minuscule difference between an electric train. So if I were arguing that these high-speed diesel trains would be continuing to emit and cause the pollution, I wouldn't be doing this. The real answer, if you want to get rid of this pollution emissions, is to take a crack, and I know this is beyond our purview, but there's probably 3 to 4 to 5 times the amount of diesel engines running on freight. We do nothing about that. We need to do something about that, I grant you that, but to say that the issue here is the difference between 416,000 metric tons reduction or 409,000 metric tons reduction as the reason we're going to spend $4 billion more or $2 billion more, depending on who you say, I find that irresponsible, and I don't mean that in a frivolous way. We need to think this through, because we can take that money and advance the cause either in the Central Valley by upgrading track, perhaps, I don't know if we can do it on the Phase 2, which would be to Sacramento, but we could certainly help advance track from San Jose to Gilroy, which would have an impact on air, and certainly Anaheim-Burbank, Anaheim-Burbank, which would reduce air quality and congestion, et cetera. That's my fundamental problem. I really like the idea, because of the risk analysis on the unutilized asset, that we will have to move into sort of leasing assets and making money that way. I think that's absolutely appropriate. I also don't think we need to make the expenses of the tracking systems and the high-speed vehicle procurement and the maintenance associated with that. So if you took those pieces out and then proceeded to improve, say, 3 sections, we would be able to lease those sections and get similar revenue from those sections, which might actually be more, because I believe the ridership in the Central Valley will increase dramatically, just as it will with the high-speed train. So that's my fundamental concern here, aside from other things. But I took a little exception on page 20 because I thought the way that was portrayed was trying to lead us into a conclusion that I think is inappropriate.
Okay, I'd like to do the following, which is I'd like to have you respond. I know Board Member Perea has a question, and then unless anyone else has a question, I'm going to try and wrap up this section so we can get to the next part. And in particular, some of us would like a break, and I'd like to do that while we're all paying attention. So could you respond to Board Member Curtin's questions? Board Member Perea is next.
Sure. Just to address a couple of the points you made. First, the one-seat ride versus the penalty in terms of having to change our models take into consideration the change, and so therefore that penalty and the directing result for the ridership is already accounted for in here, and that has been addressed. That's part of the model that we run in terms of, it's part of the Cal State model. Every change, every time you have to change, there's a penalty added, so they adjust the ridership response to that.
Okay,
And we can provide you, certainly give you detail on that, and I'll make sure that you get the backup on that.
And
sure.
The ridership projections seem a little.
We certainly will provide you some detail on that. And the second issue on the greenhouse gases, again, it's a similar response in that we've compared equally and exactly the same the benefits and the changes based on each service, rather than trying to compare with exterior existing air quality conditions. So again, when we provide the further benefit to the Senator, we will do so for you.
Just one comment. You did take the part, and this isn't in your study, I'm not sure, Dan, but in the business plan, you did make a point of pointing out that Tier 4 diesel will add a certain amount, and electric will reduce a dramatic amount. And I believe that was an unfair comparison. Either you're adding to existing, or you're adding 6,500 metric tons in toto, as opposed to existing. And then you're looking at a massive reduction by electric trains. It just doesn't make sense, and it shouldn't have been written that way. If you were going to refer to Tier 4 diesel, you should have referred to it on the baseline of what it would have reduced similarly to the electric trains. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I answer the question about what we did and did not do in the study. And so within the corridor, we did not look at variations in technology from Merced to Bakersfield. But what we did do was take the project update report and the analysis that underlied that, did an analysis of ridership and operations and maintenance costs, provided comments based on that, and in part helped think through, along with stakeholders and the authority, the potential business model that was put forth. Those comments were taken, and the ATO provided us an updated forecast. And then we utilized that forecast and conducted stress cases on that I discussed in the presentation. When you think about that corridor, the 3 key model drivers are indeed ridership, which are based upon travel time savings and connectivity in the corridor, are very, very important to looking at the boosts in ridership. The operational expenses, for which we're looking at synergies within the context of the business model, and capital expenses. And I think the analysis related to the timing of capital expenses does impact the return on investment.
So you based it on the project update report, which included the electrification and the cost of buying trains, et cetera, and operations and maintenance.
Yes, and we made a number of.
And I think that's a cart before the horse in some respects, but that's what you were charged with, so I assume, I understand that and I appreciate that.
Okay.
There's
Can
other
we,
questions, but I'm going to.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to just say one thing, Mr. Chairman. Director Curtin, so what they responded to is what we directed, and that was, just do a business case report on what was released last May the 1st, which was the proposed Merced Bakersfield interim service. So their report, as I've read it carefully, complies line by line with what we'd requested of them to do. So there wasn't ever the intention of directing them or asking them to do any other studies other than just to evaluate the benefits and the risks of Bakersfield Merced.
Well, I agree that it will bring great benefits to the valley, no question about that.
Okay, Board Member Perea, and then I'm going to
just a couple comments. The first, staff, thank you for the reports. I think you did deliver to us exactly what we asked you to do, and I believe that having now received these reports, we could, in this public comment period, move forward to making a final decision, which our board is tasked, and our board is tasked to build an electrified high-speed rail in the state of California. I believe that's what we should keep our focus on. Now, I understand, and I'm glad we did have some discussion here today about air quality and the effects of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I have to say, by any measure, and I'm not proud of saying this number, but I mean, the San Joaquin Valley has probably the worst air pollution in this country. And I think anything that we do as a part of, in this case, this project, to reduce that is needed, just as it is in other parts of the state. What bothers me to some extent is comments I've heard in this boardroom in the past few months, as well as by some folks in the state legislature, and even some folks coming out of Washington, D.C., that maybe it's okay and it's a good idea just to build 119 miles of diesel trains in the San Joaquin Valley and call it a day. I mean, I think that's a mistake. It's a retreat. And it's not something that we should even be considering as a board that is tasked to build electrified high-speed rail in the state. Now, the only comments I'll make with respect to the reports I have before us, I know there were a lot of assumptions made, and but they were educated assumptions, and I don't really hear a lot of folks debating or questioning those assumptions. I mean, they are what they are. But what appears to me to be a little more solid in these reports was the fact that when you did the comparisons, the numbers were based against a business plan in one region and a white paper in another region, which identified what their long-term needs were. And from there, we were able to develop what those costs are. And I don't think there's any question in these reports that if the $4.8 billion was moved, it would not meet the needs, the total needs of those areas to complete their tasks. So we'd be left with areas with a little more money, still not being able to finish what they would like to have, which I respect them wanting to have those things. And it would leave us in the Central Valley with 119 miles or 117 miles of a diesel train. And that to me is unacceptable. But I think what we need to move forward on, and I think we all know what, the elephant in the room, is folks in LA and folks in the Bay Area do need more money to complete their systems. We all agree with that. And I think we all should be working to the extent that we can with them to find ways to increase funding revenues for them, whether it's through cap and trade or any other funding sources that are out there. But to spend any more time, in my opinion, saying, let's move all or a portion of the $4.8 billion out of the Central Valley when we know the benefits that will have, not just in terms of increasing ridership and developing a system that will ultimately connect to the Bay Area and LA, but it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that's where our focus should be, Mr. Chairman, and I'll leave it there.
Okay, that sounded like a no question for the presenters. I'd like to close off this section, particularly to allow some of us who are recent grandparents to have a break for 10 minutes until we come back at 12:30. But I would like to thank the authority, the early train operator, and KPMG for very thorough and timely analysis. I know this is hard, really taking a look at what in a disciplined, transparent, and accountable way, that all of our board members have the opportunity to ask all the questions that they want and make sure we're stress testing this. That's our job, so I appreciate everyone doing that. Appreciate the hard work, and I think really from a high-speed rail authority standpoint, really understanding and have confidence that what we are recommending really does deliver results for the residents of the state of California in all of the measures that we all think are important. Does it help improve ridership performance? Does it provide congestion relief? Does it reduce emissions, particularly greenhouse gases? Is it operationally efficient, and is it a good use of the capital investment? And so, again, we're beginning this process. This is the beginning of an examination of that. We will explore it some more in the business plan presentation and the CEO report, and then we will have 2 months for ongoing public comment about this before we have to come back and approve it. I'd also ask for those members of the public who are commenting, I have a very large list of those who'd like to comment, and I really appreciate it. But if we could ask everyone to keep your comments to less than 2 minutes, we'll make sure we get to all of them before your chairman has to take another break. So with that, why don't we come back at 12:30 and promptly start with the presentation from our CEO on the business plan. Thank you. If I could ask my fellow board members to join us, just because we're tight on time. I know a number of people have 2 o'clock meetings, so we're going to try and wrap this up by 2 o'clock. We have a very large number of public comments, which we will get to all of them, but I do want to make sure that we have a chance to hear from our CEO on the business plan and CEO update. Okay. And then we will go to brief board questions and then go to public comment. We'll try and wrap by 2. So, okay. Now we're on to item number 4, the 2020 business plan, and we will turn it over to CEO Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brian Kelly, the Chief Executive Officer of the California High-Speed Rail Authority. I'm here on this agenda item to review the content of the draft 2020 business plan. Board members just heard presentations that went into the direction that's outlined in this plan in terms of the work done by the KPMG team at the request of the F&A committee and its director on the enhanced or refined business case for that Merced to Bakersfield stretch, and also the important work that was requested on the side-by-side analysis from some of our board members. Both of those conclusive documents help drive what's in the business plan. I'd also just like to say at the outset that since I've been in this position at the board, I view the draft business plan as the recommendation from management to the board. It was stated earlier the board hasn't made a decision on exactly where to go, and that's correct. I lay out in the business plan the recommendation based on the best data that we have before us, and when the board adopts that plan, we view that as the direction needed to move forward. I would say this, with the environmental work getting completed, both to the Bakersfield extension and coming up to the Merced extension this year in 2020, a timely adoption and direction is important for us to move forward on important long-term procurements that we have to put in place with respect to rolling stock, tracks, and other things. And so it's timely for us to make a decision relatively soon. Again, I hope with the adoption of a 2020 business plan, that direction will be clear to all of us. I want to just say one other thing at the outset about this plan. Perhaps the greatest compliment to this plan, people can always disagree with we are going on the policy direction, but somebody said to me recently, this plan reads like it was very simple to write. That's a compliment, but it's not true. I want to say, yes, thank you. I want to say that it's a compliment because it does reflect the fine work of the staff that put this document together. And I want to just take a moment to thank all of my program leads and division heads who and program folks who put a lot of time and attention into the details of this document. Specifically, I want to thank our special projects team within our communications unit, people like Sheila and Barbara and Dax and Matt and Shane. These are folks who put in literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours to get this document done. I can attest that all of them got the flu. And so we've now fought through that, but it's a lot of work, and I'm very appreciative of the work that's been done. Okay. With that, let me get into the PowerPoint that I have here. First, some of the important issues with the business plan. As you all know, it's required by law. Under the PUC section, we are required to put a business plan out every 2 years. It starts with the draft plan that, as I said earlier, is the staff recommendation to the board. That is followed by a 60-day public comment period. We will have 3 hearings of this board during that time, and there will also be legislative hearings on the draft that we'll be looking forward to in March. Then we'll come out of that with an adoption request before the board by April 21st so that we can meet our statutory duty, which is to submit the business plan to the legislature on May 1st. And so May 1st, 2020 is our time to do that. We do want to hear from people all over the state. Today's hearing is in Sacramento. Our March hearing is scheduled for Los Angeles. Our April hearing is scheduled for Fresno. So there's an opportunity to get a diverse sense of opinion about what's in the plan and take public comment from the 3 key regions of the state. Okay. I initially had this as sort of what each chapter goes into in the plan, but I wanted to modify that a little bit for purposes of this presentation and just talk about the themes that are articulated in the business plan. The first is a reminder that California is the national leader when it comes to clean transportation, and now is not the time to turn back. And what's meant by that is there has been a very deliberate effort in California to pass proposals, policies, and funding streams to ensure that our investments in transportation do not just yield mobility improvements, but yield mobility improvements, important environmental improvements that are more important than ever in the era of climate change. And that we also yield great economic benefits from the investments we make. California began a very targeted, deliberate process in the last decade. I would say first starting with the passage of the Global Warming Solutions Act that set standards for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and then followed that up with several policy declarations since then and a series of funding streams, the most recent being the passage of SB 1, which, among its other benefits to transportation, also included the greatest single investment in public transit and rail in the history of the state. So while this authority is not a recipient of that, SB 1 is a historic measure in terms of providing funding for transit and rail purposes in California. So again, we're a national leader. Let's keep that standing in the state of California. Secondly, the cost estimates that are in this plan are generally within the 2018 ranges that were in the 2018 business plan. Members may recall that in 2018, we used ranges to describe the cost for the funding plan, for the project. And we largely did that because much of the project is in relatively early project development stage, and it's not appropriate to try to pinpoint a specific cost at that time, and so we use ranges until the project proceeds further. 3, we went through this really with the last 2 presentations before the board. A conclusion from the studies that have been asked for by the board reaches that the best use of the available high-speed rail funding is to expand our Central Valley segment first to Merced, Fresno, and Bakersfield as the initial building block of this system, not to stop the system, but to get that building block in place, see electrified high-speed trains running in California, and then work to expand that going forward. 4, the key theme. Organizational changes at the High-Speed Rail Authority are having positive impact, and there's more to come. I'll go through that in the chart here, but I think it shouldn't be lost on any member here or the public generally that there's been a lot of change at the authority in a relatively short amount of time. In the past year, we've added 4 new members to this authority board, and we have completely turned over the executive management team of the authority. So there's a lot of change that has led to a lot of movement, progress, and advancement on the project. But more of that's to come. But again, a lot of change in a short amount of time here at the authority. And 5, we'll note with one slide in this presentation, and I noted in the business plan itself, that there are ways for rail generally to advance across the state while the high-speed service is delivered from Merced to Bakersfield. So those are sort of the 5 overreaching themes of the business plan. Talk about a little of them quickly and then show you some slides that reflect the points here. So again, 1, we are the national leader in clean transportation, as I mentioned. High-speed rail is the heart of electrifying our transportation sector to reduce GHG, improve mobility, expand the economy. We are moving in California toward putting the era of diesel behind us when it comes to passenger rail. And that, again, is not just about this project, but what's going on up and down the state. And we think that that work should continue. 2, as I said earlier, modest cost adjustments in this plan compared to the 2018 business plan, and I'll roll through some of those. First, I'll just note the valley-to-valley estimate range is adjusted mostly to account for the Merced segment being added to that range. In our prior business plans, the Merced element was part of the Phase 1 cost estimate, but because we would propose to move it up, we had now put it in the valley-to-valley estimate, so that affected the range. The only other issue is we did, because we don't have the full funding for valley-to-valley, there is a cost with delay and an inflation factor that we had to apply here, and so we did that. Then finally, the Phase 1 cost and estimate ranges are unchanged from the 2018 business plan. I mentioned earlier moving forward with investments in clean transportation, and often I think people think of that as, gee, it costs more to do it cleaner or to do it more efficiently. And this is a chart that's in the business plan that I think is worth noting for members here and for the public at large. Certainly, high-speed rail is not a cheap investment. This is a 500-mile-plus system between San Francisco and the Los Angeles, Anaheim area. Our range of the cost for that is between $63 and $98 billion. That is a lot of money. The benefits of that are huge, and one of the things the authority did back in 2012 was estimate what similar or like mobility benefits would cost if you just did conventional investments into highway and airport expansions. And this chart reflects that difference. The mobility benefits you get with high-speed rail are big, and the cost of doing so, as we said, is the range between 63 and 98. To achieve those similar benefits through more traditional investments in our airports and expanding our highways sufficient enough to get a similar mobility benefit costs about double what high-speed rail costs. That was first established in 2012. That analysis has been updated in 2020. We ran the assumptions by Caltrans, and we received a letter from the department affirming that our estimates for the costs on the highway and airport expansions are within their ranges. The other, of course, important reason to continue down the road of doing high-speed rail in California, and particularly electrified high-speed rail, is the mobility benefit versus traditional travel. This is just a simple chart that's in the business plan, but whether you're traveling from Merced to Bakersfield, San Jose to Fresno, or the whole stretch from San Francisco to Los Angeles, it's really this mobility benefit, this reduction in travel time, that causes travelers to change modes and to move from car or traditional rail service to electrified high-speed rail service. It's the transformative nature of this investment, moving that much more quickly between destination points in the state. It truly has the effect of shrinking the state of California, allowing regions to become mega regions and people to decide and have more options about where they live and where they work, and employers to decide, I think, with greater opportunity and consideration on where they locate facilities, job centers, and things like that. So again, this is fundamentally the reason that we're doing this. I think often it's lost as well on folks on how much progress we're actually making when it comes to electrified high-speed rail in California. If we move forward with the 171 miles in the Central Valley, and we consider the new player in the game, the Virgin Train proposal that's coming from Las Vegas into the San Bernardino County area, you know, by 2022, we have 350 miles of electrified high-speed rail under construction in the state of California. And again, in the next 18 to 24 months, the entirety of the Phase 1 system between San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Anaheim is fully cleared, environmentally cleared, which means you can move forward on strategic early investments to then de-risk that project further, set the stage for private sector assistance and consideration on how much and how you might find additional funding to close those gaps between the Valley and the Bay Area and the Valley and Southern California. I'd just add that I think the emergence of the private sector partner in Southern California, the Virgin Train Lines, is a welcomed new thing in California. For a long time, there had been question about whether or not there's true private sector interest in electrified high-speed rail, and I think that that project presents the first evidence that there is. I mentioned that under Theme 2, our costs are largely unchanged. This slide really shows the differences in our costs in this plan versus prior plans. The Merced to Bakersfield stretch, we do not change the cost estimate. In the 2019 project update report, the $20.4 billion cost estimate was what we called a 70% probability cost estimate, and we maintain that in the business plan. As I mentioned in my introduction, in the Silicon Valley to Central Valley line, the Valley to Valley line, our ranges have been adjusted in the 2020 business plan to account mostly for the Merced extension being moved from Phase 1 into Valley to Valley. That's about a $2 billion increase, moving it from Phase 1 into the Valley to Valley segment, but that is necessary if we're going to complete that work sooner. It does not represent a cost increase, but an accounting move and an appropriate accounting move. The only issue here that I guess could be considered a new cost is, as I said, because we do not have full funding for all of Valley to Valley, because we've been delayed in part by federal disengagement on the environmental process. We are estimating it will take a little longer to get the Valley to Valley stretch done, move that date from 2029 to 2031, and in so doing, we have to account for increased inflation costs, and so we do that. The Phase 1 system overall, the range is unchanged from the 2018 business plan, the 2019 project update report, or this business plan. And again, the only cost change from the prior reports to this one are the inflation factor that I mentioned relative to the completion of Valley to Valley. The third theme, as I mentioned, is the best use of available high-speed rail funding is to get the operating segment going in the Valley first. I think it was mentioned earlier, there's great economic benefit with that in terms of expanding job years and the economic output from making that investment in the Valley. We'd see our jobs numbers move to over 203,000 job years and approaching $40 billion in economic output. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I'm going to roll through the next two slides quite quickly because I think they were covered in the presentations made by the ETO. These are, again, the reasons that we see the best value in the Central Valley as the beginning place from an economic, a ridership, and an environmental perspective. And again, these slides sort of go through those. I don't want to repeat them here in the interest of time, but and I think they were covered in the prior reports. This is a chart that was included in the ETO's, the early train operators presentation. It is the sort of bottom line conclusions from the three areas to consider the investment of funds. And again, it largely comes down on a recommendation to move to the electrified segment in the Valley as the initial building block for the system. business case, again, KPMG went through all of that, so I will skip it here. Two of the things that are worth noting in terms of themes in the business plan. One, I mentioned organizational changes. Again, 4 new members of this board in just the last year. I think we've replaced now 6 executive management positions on the board, and that comes with a new culture, a new focus, and a sort of collective intent to meet our obligations under our federal funding grant agreements and to move forward on this project as efficiently as we can. And so we are putting the team in place to do that. And I'm proud to say, and we'll show in this section, I think some of the advancements we note in the business plan that we've achieved over the past year. And of course, the business plan goes into achievements that we expect to see in 2020. And again, I think the last thing I mentioned is that certainly if you include some of the things we've asked for in prior business plans and we repeat in this business plan, namely the benefit of extending the cap and trade program, you'll see it doesn't only benefit high-speed rail, but it benefits transit rail projects up and down the state. Again, just some of the momentum in terms of performance that we are seeing. This is right out of the business plan. Our average monthly expenditures by quarter have doubled in the last year. March of 2019, we were spending about $22 million a month on the capital expenditures. That's now up to about $46 million a month. This chart reflects about a tripling of the weekly number of workers that are out on the site working every week. We started the year at about 217 per week dispatched. Now we're approaching 700. That's just a reflection of increased picked up activity in the field. And of course, this chart's also in the plan, but part of the momentum picking up in the field. You see our guideway numbers up about 40%. In the past year, we've nearly doubled the number of structures that are either underway or completed. I want to be clear, there's a lot more to do on both of these, but the trend is in the right direction. In 2020, I expect this trend to continue and even improve, and I think we'll all see that, and it must if we're going to meet our ARA deadlines, but we are trending in a positive direction. As I mentioned, we've asked for in prior business plans the consideration of the extension of cap and trade. I remind all the board members and the public at large that the cap and trade extension that was achieved in 2017, the enactment of AB 398, has had a very stabilizing effect on those revenues. We estimate our funding and our budget in this business plan in ranges between an annual amount of $500 million for this project out of cap and trade up to $750 million. And I would just note that since the enactment of AB 398, we are bringing in about $735 million from cap and trade revenues over the last 8 auctions. And so, again, it's had a stabilizing effect. One of the things that we haven't talked about much in prior business plans that's worth noting in this business plan is that the extension of cap and trade does not just benefit high-speed rail. As you see in the top 3 rows of this chart, which is included in the business plan, high-speed rail, transit and intercity rail capital programs, and low-carbon transit operations programs, they combine to receive about 40% of cap and trade revenues. That's not a mistake. It's estimated in California that greenhouse gases, about 40% of them are emitted from the transportation sector. So when we put together several years ago the sort of how we would lay out the expenditures from cap and trade, you add up those first 3 rows, and 40% goes to transportation entities, high-speed rail 25%, and then other transit and rail providers in the state of California 15%. In addition, the other rail providers in California are recipients of SB1 funds as well for, again, expanded transit rail investment. But as you can also see, the extension of cap and trade affects affordable housing funding, safe and affordable drinking water funding, and other discretionary funding programs that are aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and expanding the economy. In essence, that's what's in the business plan in terms of the themes and the key elements of it. Just as a reminder for the board members, on timing, the business plan draft was out on Wednesday the 12th. This is our first board meeting here in Sacramento on this. And again, March in LA, April in Fresno. We seek to have you adopt a plan at that April meeting so that we can meet our May 1st statutory requirement to submit the plan to the legislature. And with that, members, I'm happy to conclude and answer your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, CEO Kelly. We have time for some questions from the board, and then I'm going to take public comment, which I'm going to ask that we get 5 people lined up at a time, since we've got a large number of them. But let's start with any questions from board members at this point.
Can we borrow against the height?
Can you use your mic? Sorry. Can you use your mic?
Can we borrow against the cap and trade?
Yeah, we will need additional statutory authority to be able to do that. The reason
So we
is
go
that,
back to the legislature?
yeah, at some point we should. I mean, we've advocated in this business plan and in prior business plans, not just for the extension of cap and trade, but also for the ability to finance against it. And that requires things like assuring there's a floor that comes to this program, and that we can use that floor to enter into financing agreements for the program. So we've asked for that in the past. It's something that we would desire again, but I would say because it's an auction-based revenue system, we can't finance against it as the law stands today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Other comments or questions at this point? Danny?
Thank you for that report on the
Yes.
119.
Can you use your mic, Danny?
Thank you for the report on the 119. The only a couple of things, I'm a little concerned about the ambitious timeline for Valley to Valley and San Francisco Anaheim. I don't know if those dates, which have been picked up in the press, were designed for analysis purposes or actually nose to the grindstone, because the gap there is so enormous.
Yeah. So I would let me answer it this way. Look, the number one thing that's going to drive our ability to deliver all of those segments under those timelines is the availability of funding. We don't have full funding to close the Valley to Valley gap right now, but as we achieve the environmental documents be completed in the next 18 to 24 months, that is about a decade in front of when that work can be done. If we can get funding in hand, both whether it's federal, state, private, or whatever, you can start to get to work on that project. So we are required under the law to do an analysis of cost estimates and to provide cost estimates. So we do that, but we acknowledge, and we say so in this business plan, that the number one driver of the schedule on this is the funding or lack thereof to complete those segments.
Yeah, and I also want to comment on the Virgin Train, the private investment.
Yes, sir.
They tend to go where the money is, like what was his name, Willie Sutton? Rob Banks, because that's where the money is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we could figure out, within whatever context we end up landing, how we could help that, and I don't want to say help that train along, but help our corridor in that portion of the train to keep their enthusiasm up, because they're going to make a lot of money when that train's completed, and they're going to use our trains for it. So that would be an income stream that we might be able to utilize down the road.
I appreciate that comment. I would just add that the prospects of us joining systems in Palmdale is why we entered into an MOU with Virgin Trains and the California State Transportation Agency to work through things like potential interoperability options, how we might be able to collectively figure out a way to get beyond the Palmdale stretch going north or south. But I would just say we're bullish on the introduction of that system in Southern California and see great potential for it to work with our system as we
It's
go forward.
reminiscent of many a discussion in the past, and I like the idea as infrastructure owner of getting a piece of that action. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the board at this time? We will have plenty of opportunities to discuss this at both the March and April meetings, as well as through testimony of the legislature. But if there are no further questions, I'd like to go to public comment now, if that's okay on this section.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Right. So thank you. I'm going to read the first, I'm doing these in the order that they were received. So I'm going to do the first 5, if you could line up, and then we'll take the next 5 after that. And again, appreciate everyone's public commentary and in the interest of ensuring that everyone has a chance to talk. If we could ask you to keep them to no more than 2 minutes, it would be much appreciated. The first 5 are Troy Hightower, Sarah Hugh, Mike Murphy, Mike Rawson, and Renee Gutierrez. And I apologize in advance for any butchering of any name that I do unintentionally. So please correct me when you say who you are. So, Mr. Hightower.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Troy Hightower. I'm an independent transportation consultant from Bakersfield. I have 2 comments, some of which I've made before the board previously. The main is recommending operating the Central Valley interim service using the existing Amtrak station in downtown Bakersfield. The other is encourage the authority to consider locating maintenance facilities at the Kern County sites that were submitted as part of the original request for siting of the heavy maintenance facilities. Now we'll go over briefly some of the reasons I believe the Amtrak station would work. One is the readiness. It's ready to go now. It was part of the original Fresno, Bakersfield, EIR, EIS. So electrifying from Popular along BNSF to that station is in the EIR, so it's environmentally cleared. The city of Bakersfield submitted a letter to the authority, stated their opposition to any kind of interim station at Popular. And quoting, they said, electrifying the adjacent BNSF Amtrak rail line in order to allow high-speed rail trains to continue to the existing Bakersfield Amtrak station on an interim basis. And that's a quote from their letter. I have reviewed the draft 2020 business plan. I do support it. I've reviewed the studies, and I do support the importance of the interim operation. I think what I'm recommending by using an existing station will get us early ridership. And I think ridership is the most important thing to get at this point in the project, or any project. Both the business plans and the studies mention a cross-platform connection to the throughway buses. That's currently what happens at the Amtrak station. I came here on the Amtrak station from Bakersfield, and the train was full, and the majority of all those people came up on the buses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Hugh.
Good afternoon, Chairman, board members, Mr. Kelly, and staff. My name is Sarah Krabari-Hill, and I'm the CEO of the Greater Merced Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here today to express the Chamber's support for high-speed rail and the draft 2020 business plan. The Merced to Bakersfield interim operating segment will generate significant economic benefits for Merced, the Central Valley, and the entire state. It will result in approximately $38 billion in total economic activity and create an abundance of jobs. The Chamber supports the plan because it moves high-speed rail closer to Merced and benefits all of California. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Is Mayor Murphy here? There you are.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, board members, Mr. Kelly, and staff. I'm Mike Murphy. I'm the mayor of the city of Merced and also a small business owner. I've been a longtime advocate of high-speed rail and believe that the 2020 business plan is the path to successful high-speed rail service in California. Not only is high-speed rail an economic boost with construction jobs today, it will bring thousands of green jobs when it begins operations. The draft business plan keeps costs in line with the 2018 plan, improves air quality, reduces travel time, and is a key step to statewide high-speed rail system. Statewide high-speed rail system. The City of Merced supports the business plan because it connects ACE and the San Joaquins, provides the vital test track needed to begin the system, and lays the backbone for high-speed rail here in the Golden State. Also wanted to mention that he had to leave at the break, but the superintendent and president of Merced College was also here and would share his support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Murphy. Mike Rawson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Mike Rawson. I'm the Senior Transit Analyst with Sacramento Area Council of Governments, and I'm here on behalf of James Corliss, Executive Director for SACOG, Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Sacramento Area Council of Governments is in support of the Governor's Rail Plan and CHSRA's policy recommendation to continue pursuing a Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield interim operating segment for high-speed rail. The Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield interim operating segment will leverage the maximum degree of connectivity to other inner-city rail services, including the improvements to the ACE San Joaquin services that link our region to the IOS terminus in Merced. SACOG's adopted 2020 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy assumes enhanced intercity rail connections integrated with high-speed rail over the coming years. The plan also lays out a transportation investment and land use strategy to support a prosperous region. With access to jobs and economic opportunity, transportation options, and affordable housing that serves all residents. Outcomes we anticipate from implementing the MTP SES include better air quality, open space, and natural resources preservation, and helping California achieve the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. The Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield interim operating segment is an important step forward in expanding mobility options throughout the Central Valley and beyond. The success of this early interim service is essential towards implementing the ultimate high-speed rail system between the Bay Area, Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, and Southern California. And I have included a copy of James Corliss' support letter for the members of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, and we do have copies of the letter, which we will make sure to share, so thank you. And Mr. Gutierrez, and then while you're coming up, let me announce the next five. Please come up. Mr. Segali, Mr. Levitt, Mr. Vito Chase, I'm mispronouncing your name, Vito, Pat Hume, and Jamison Parker, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and authority members. Good afternoon, my name is Rene Gutierrez. I represent the Merced County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. The Hispanic Chamber of Commerce advocates, promotes, and networks with Hispanic and non-Hispanic businesses in Merced County. As you well know, in California and through the corridor, which high-speed rail is going to be going through, you have over 50% population of Hispanics. We are here to show our strong support. Once you guys build, we are here to actually collaborate, partner with you guys to get the word out, the media out, and get the Hispanic community on board with riding the bullet train. So as you well know, I've actually been in Fresno. That's what it's known as. So if we can partner together in the future, just let us know. So with investment of $4.1 billion and based on the data provided by today's studies describing the change of ridership, revenues, and congestion relief, the Merced County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce strongly supports the 2020 draft business plan to move forward with the governor's proposal and the high-speed rail staff recommendation to pursue a more attractive interim operating segment between Merced and Bakersfield, providing high-speed rail service to Californians at the earliest possible time. Based on the information on the slide, the Merced to Bakersfield will likely happen before 10 years, while the other two options are going to be past 10 years. So we want to get train on the track as soon as possible and the Hispanic community on board. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Michael Segala.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board. Thank you for allowing us to provide comments. I'm representing the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council, which is the collection of the 8 regional transportation planning agencies, or COGs, of the San Joaquin Valley. We submitted a letter. Thank you very much for putting up in front. We have coalesced around this item, which always has been the case, but we think it's very important for us. We've included it in our platform for Valley Voice, for our annual advocacy to Sacramento, and many of our colleagues are here individually from individual COGs as well today. We support the 2020 business plan and build out of the interim operating segment. We support all long-term transportation investments in the valley, and high-speed rail is obviously an important piece of that puzzle. High-speed rail will lay the cornerstone for our future growth, prosperity, and economic integration with the rest of California. And the commitment to the interim operating segment allows us to strategically plan for future development consistent with California's climate goals, including facilitating transit-oriented development, multimodalism, and meaningful economic development in the valley, among many other benefits. California needs a high-speed rail passenger system. We currently have a system under construction, and now is the time to complete that work that has started. There is way too much to lose in the valley without it. Thank you for your commitment and partnership to us.
Thank you, Mr. Segala. Mr. Lovett.
Good afternoon, Chairman Nonza, members of the board. I'm Dan Levitt. I represent the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission and the Central Valley Rail Working Group. The San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission is the owner-operator of the ACE Rail Service, and the Central Valley Rail Working Group is a 20-agency working group that includes all the regional transportation planning agencies, regional rail operators, and major cities in the Sacramento to Merced corridor. Both of these groups strongly support the draft 2020 Central Valley California High-Speed Rail Authority business plan that includes moving forward with the Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield High-Speed Rail interim operating segment and additional stops at Kings Tulare and Madera. Sacramento and the Northern San Joaquin Valley will greatly benefit from the interim high-speed rail operations. We will continue to work with you to ensure the success of high-speed rail operations and to make sure that improved and expanded San Joaquin's and ACE services meet with high-speed rail at your intermodal station in Merced. Please take action in April to move forward with the recommendations of your draft 2020 business plan and implement true high-speed rail service in California. I did want to note that a number of entities are here today, but some aren't, and so we do have some letters we'd like to submit that have already have in support of this concept, and also that the Vice Mayor of Stockton was here for 2.5 hours, but he had to leave, and he wanted to let you know he's got an election in 2 weeks, but this is very, very important to him, so he was here, unfortunately had to leave, but I'm going to like to insert his comments as well, too.
Okay, thank you very much, and we will have those for the record. Vito.
There's something else for you. Good afternoon, Chair Mendoza, fellow board members, CEO Kelly, Vito Chiesa, Stanislaus County Supervisor, but here as the chair of the California Partnership of the San Joaquin and chair of the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, the agency responsible for the administration and operation of the San Joaquin rail system. I just want you to know this morning I got into a fight with a piece of bacon and I chipped my tooth. Oh. So if I whistle when I talk, you'll know that it's not intentional. I want to express my strong support for the California Partnerships and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, their strong support for the draft 2020 business plan, and thank CEO Kelly, his staff, and the consultants for their hard work on the draft business plan and its supporting documents. We strongly support the board moving forward with the governor's proposal of the high-speed rail staff recommendations and pursue the Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment with additional stops in Kings Tulare and Madera, providing high-speed rail service to Californians at the earliest possible time. The Merced to Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment will improve access and connectivity to other destinations throughout California through better connections with ACE, the San Joaquin service in the north, and the San Joaquin Thruway bus system from Bakersfield traveling to Southern California. Our upcoming San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority 2020 draft business plan, which will be released later this month, will highlight the coordination that we have been doing with high-speed rail and your early train operator. You have my commitment that the San Joaquins will fully integrate with and support the success of the Merced to Bakersfield interim operating segment. We look forward to continuing to work with you to implement this vision. I will just point out that this morning I had a quick conversation with Assemblymember Gray. I'm leaving some of his op-ed pieces. He's very passionate about this, but he just wanted you to know that he has a strong support for moving forward, and I urge you to take action in April to move this forward with the 2020 CHRA draft business plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and hope you find a good dentist on the way home.
It's 3:30.
Okay, good.
So.
Mr. Hume.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendoza, members of the board. Pat Hume, I'm a City of Elk Grove council member, just down the road a little bit. I'm also on the Sacramento Regional Transportation District and a vice chair of the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, from whom you just heard of our chair. I reserve the right to channel my inner millennial here and get my notes from my phone, but given that they start out with good morning, I'll probably just leave that alone there. We're here to show our support for the board to adopt the governor's proposal in the interim segment for Merced to Fresno Bakersfield. We here in the local region, as well as our regional elected and Sacramento Regional Transit District and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority have lobbied to get over $1 billion of SB1 funds in order to improve some of the system access north of Merced. So we're hoping that someday we can enter into an additional connectivity. But in the meantime, we've done a lot to try to provide that access to the greater Sacramento region. So we would like for you to take action on the plan that's put before you come April.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hume. And Mr. Parker, and while you're coming up, I'm going to ask the next 5 to line up. There's a group that's said to be all together from Fresno Works, Gil Esquire. I can't, Bill Zalaki, Jennifer Kaniger, I think. Sorry, and Rosa Park. So those 5 could come up, please. Excuse my butchering of your names. Please, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. My name is Jamison Parker. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Capital Improvements for the Midtown Association. The Midtown Association is a property business improvement district representing about 1,200 property owners here in Sacramento. We're very focused on improving the transportation network. We know of living in a constrained environment that we have to focus on improving other active alternative transportation modes. And we've been lucky enough to be working with the staff from the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority on bringing passenger rail service right through the heart of Midtown, with one of their stations being located at between Q and R Street on 19th and 20th Street. We really feel like that's going to add value to the surrounding neighborhood, the businesses in that community. We also believe that pairing that passenger rail service with the business plan that is before you today is going to add even more additional improvements to the community. So I'm here just to ask that you move the current recommendation forward, including the interim operating segment between Merced and Bakersfield, and approve the business plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Parker, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Gil Esquire. I'm a city council member from Turlock, California, also a member of Stanislaus Council of Governments, and I'm here to support the 2020 business plan as it is. I urge acceptance of the 2020 business plan. Also ask not to divert the funds, the $5 billion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and the board members. Appreciate you taking time to hear from us and taking public comments. My name is Bill Zalaki. I am was close, that was good.
All right, Bill.
Just forget the S, it's really not there, but we just put it in there just to see if anybody's paying attention. Thank you, though. Anyway, my name is Bill Zalaki. I am a city council member with the city of Modesto, as well as past chair and current member of Stanislaus Council of Governments, and a ex officio of the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission. And as we are discussing this, I can't tell you the earth-breaking abilities that is before us that will influence and change forever the San Joaquin Valley. Some of the challenges that we have. I fully support the 2020 draft business plan that staff is given you to review, as well as the governor is supporting that particular draft. It will significantly change things within our strategiig area and that whole entire Central Valley, as well as interconnections as we move forward into the Southern Link. Don't want to say anything more other than we support it. Thank you so much.
Mr. Zalaki, without an S. Apologize. We'll get it right next time. Please.
We all came from the area with really difficult names. My name, board members, chair and board members, my name is Jenny Canoyer. I'm a council member from the city of Modesto and also a member of the Stanislaus Council of Government. I can't express any better than Senator Hogan-Giorni did and the people that have spoke before me about the need to continue developing the Bakersfield to Merced extension. So I'm here to say that I am very much in favor of the draft 2020 business plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kanayer, and it's my eyesight, not your name, that was the problem in terms of pronunciation, so thank you. Ms. Park.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Donza and members of the board, Assemblymember Arembolov, who's left, but CEO Kelly and the public. My name is Rosa de Leon Park. I'm the Executive Director of the Stanislaus Council of Governments in the city of Modesto. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Also, Stancock has provided a letter that Dan Levin mentioned earlier, so we have submitted a letter of support. I would also like to express our strong support of the governor's proposal and the California High-Speed Rail Authority staff's recommendation to pursue the Merced Fresno Bakersfield High-Speed Rail interim operating segment with the additional stops to Kings, Tulare, and Madera, providing high-speed rail service to Californians at the earliest time possible, but also look forward to your action that you will take in April. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Park. And I now know we have a big group, and while you're all coming up, and I think one of you is going to speak for the group. Yes? No? Okay. Okay, you're going to speak very quickly, so please, Mr. Kabasi. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Kabasi.
Asking a politician to limit their speech,
I know, I'm sorry.
No. Chair Badonka and board, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm a councilman from the city of Fresno. My name is Mike Karbasi. Mayor Lee Brand can't be here today, unfortunately, because he's ill. I want to make it very clear from the get-go, the city of Fresno is fully supportive of the business plan as is. I was born and raised in my community of Fresno, and I got to admit, there's been a lot of folks over the years that have felt they have been left behind by Sacramento. But that all changed when this board chose to locate the first segment of high-speed rail in the Central Valley starting in 2015. It finally made a lot of us feel like we finally have a voice. That decision is now being questioned because another region is trying to hijack these funds for its own benefit, the funds that are essential to complete the Valley project. Now, the Valley, fortunately, has an ally in Governor Gavin Newsom, and the governor has continued to demonstrate his commitment to Fresno and the Central Valley, and we ask that you join the governor in his promise not to leave us behind. You know, I've known a lot of folks that have been skeptical of high-speed rail, and a lot of them have come around and, you know, they're now on board, pun intended. Because they see clearly there is a huge benefit to locating the first segment and connecting the Central Valley to the Bay Area and Southern California. Fact is, this move is an economic game changer for my community. It's an economic game changer for Fresno. Now, Fresno's been ground zero for high-speed rail for a few years now, but it hasn't always been easy. We've had hundreds of businesses relocated. You know, we've had some businesses, because of that, leave the community or close down. We've had street closures planned for a year that are now taking 3 years. And what that does, that loss in revenue, is less discretionary funding for core services like public safety or park maintenance. But we are more than willing as a community to weather that financial storm because we are counting on the promises of this board and the economic impact generated from that promise. So there was a very thoughtful comment earlier about the investments and benefits of high-speed rail. I'll go real quick. I want to give you guys a baseline that we work with in Fresno. Our poverty rate, 30% of our population lives in poverty. The average household income in Fresno for a family is $41,500. In Anaheim, it's almost double that at $76,600. So I ask you, which community has the working families that can really value these good paying jobs more? I'm going to summarize this up because I'm out of time. So basically, it's really important because high-speed rail runs through the middle of the western portion of my district. The last thing the governor wants, the last thing the city of Fresno wants, and I hope the last thing the board wants, is a giant monolith, a monument to broken promises from Sacramento. We want to get this completed. We've invested our blood, sweat, and tears in our very limited pocketbook in securing $250,000 for a land option for a high-speed rail maintenance station. And we ask you to continue not to continue that legacy of broken promises for the Central Valley, urge you to restore your faith in Fresno, the Central Valley, your commitment to our working families in need, and we ask you to finish what we started in partnership together. Let's stay the course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Baines.
Good afternoon, members of the board, and I cannot be any more eloquent than my friend Michael Carbasi. So what I will say is this is obviously we're here. We are in complete support of the draft business plan. I want to use my time to chat a little bit about some of the discussion I heard earlier. And I wish Assemblymember Rambula was here because I wholeheartedly agree with his sentiment regarding the Valley and our air quality problems. I was the former chair of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and I was somewhat distressed to hear how it was not understood of the significant challenges that we have in air quality in the San Joaquin Valley. Funny enough, tougher than even Southern California. So I want to make sure that it's understood that our air pollution problems aren't simply because of agriculture. They really are because of truck traffic that drives from Southern California to Northern California, not stopping in the Central Valley, actually polluting us. So we actually are being harmed by the commerce from Southern California to Northern California. And lastly, I want to make sure that this board understands historically where Fresno has been in its support of high-speed rail in this project. So, and not so too distant of a past, high-speed rail was an extremely controversial, vitriol issue in the state of California. Fresno was the first city to publicly support the high-speed rail project. We have been here from the beginning. Our community has stood behind this, even with a Republican mayor and, at the time, a majority Republican council. This community stood behind high-speed rail. We know that you all are going to have decisions to make about where to place your heavy maintenance facility. To let you know, we have been preparing for that for over a decade. We have assembled land, and we have done everything we needed to make sure we are prepared for what high-speed rail is. And lastly, to this board, I admire the fact, the historicity of this moment that you guys have. Building the first high-speed rail project in the United States is an incredible honor, and I hope you all do the justice that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Mr. Bourne.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to go on the record and state that President Kopp is supportive of the draft 2020 business plan. Oh, I'm sorry. Now I'm going to just throw some planning statistics at you to really make the case for why, as a planning agency, we're supportive of the project. Number one, the San Joaquin Valley is the fastest growing area in the state of California. Our population growth in the valley from 1980 to 2015 outpaced the state's average by over 60% and the national average by over 100%. All indications are that this growth trend will continue, and by any metric, I think you could argue that the San Joaquin Valley is the new frontier in the state of California. Some other numbers. By 2050, the valley's population will increase to over 6 million from its current 4 million people. That takes us from our current share of about 11% to about 12.5%. Again, I think all indications are this will continue, and I think we have to understand that if we're going to address this population growth, that electrified high-speed rail has to be the backbone of our sustainable transportation future. It just has to be. Another statistic that's a little bit unusual, most folks aren't aware of it, that nearly 60% of our population lives within 5 miles of the State Route 99 corridor. That's about 2.5 million people. But if you factor in that population growth that we just talked about, that's going to take us to about 3.7 million people living within 5 miles of the 99 corridor. I think everybody who's familiar with 99 understands its importance in terms of goods movement for people, goods, throughout the valley, inter-valley, and throughout the state. And then lastly, something that we don't talk about a whole lot, but I think it's very important. The Fresno Yosemite International Airport is the largest regional airport in the valley. In 2019, over 650,000 passengers used the facility. That is an increase of almost 11% from the previous year. This trend is anticipated to continue and highlights the importance of an intermodal plane to high-speed rail connection that will be necessary if the valley is to achieve a sustainable transportation future as envisioned by the state. I know my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver?
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendoza and members of the board. My name is Will Oliver, Vice President of Business Services for the Fresno County Economic Development Corporation and past member of the Madera City Council and Madera County Transportation Commission. I'm here today in support of the 2020 business plan as presented. The fact of the matter is, redirecting money to Southern California away from capital-starved Central Valley communities offers a solution in search of a problem. And recommitting ourselves to the potential that this project has on those communities will drive economic transformation. Fresno is ready for that conversation and that future, and the valley-to-valley connectivity is central to it. Most recently, our community finalized a comprehensive community-based plan called Developing the Region's Inclusive and Vibrant Economy, otherwise known as DRIVE, creating the value proposition and investment plan to lift our communities and its people out of generational poverty. Connecting the Silicon Valley and Central Valley is central to activating that plan for the future. With our growing population, short commute times, lower costs of doing business, affordable housing, and untapped opportunities for innovation, the building blocks of a dynamic economy and recovery are in place if targeted infrastructure investments are made and policy considerations are carried out thoughtfully. With growth slowing in large coastal areas, the Central Valley is one of the few remaining places of California where it is possible to plan for significant growth while envisioning a way that builds economies, communities, and a desired future inclusively. Shortening the area that separates us through high-speed rail, we can draw on the talent, innovation, and capital via the valley-to-valley corridor, connecting our universities and leveraging the agricultural capital of the United States, the Central Valley, and the innovation capital of the world, the Silicon Valley. During just these initial operational years, the Valley-Valley connection via high-speed rail can be the push that moves Fresno and the Valley forward. Automatically becomes a key part of company relocations to locate here, is shortlisted as a popular destination for new companies, and directs new investment into our downtowns and commercial districts. In short, high-speed rail is Central Valley's New Deal. With high-speed rail, we can drive an economic transformation, and without it, it leaves the valley anemic and without any prescription on ways to address challenges that have failed to evade us. Again, we ask the board to recommit itself to achieve the valley-to-valley vision to build a more just, inclusive, and vibrant economy for all of our regions to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Goldsmith?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Chairman. Well, my name is Carol Goldsmith, and I'm the president of Fresno City College. So as an educator, I'd like to take a special note to look at the participation points that the Valley gets. We've certainly done our homework today. I'm here to lodge my formal support of the business plan as presented, a plan that supports the continuing construction throughout the Central Valley from Kern, Fresno to Merced. Thank you for allowing us to speak about our support for the business plan. Once approved, will significantly improve the air quality for our valley and the entire California, and of course, improve our economic outlook. The work to prepare the valley for the high-speed rail and the operation of the heavy maintenance facility began about a decade ago. And to reiterate the presentation previously, the Central Valley segment offers the best return for investment for that initial build-out. There are 4 community colleges in the Fresno County area, soon to be 5. Fresno City College being the largest, Reedley, Clovis, Madera, and of course West Hills. 10 years ago when this work started, I was the vice chancellor out at West Hills, and I remember all too well from the valley, from Merced to Bakersfield, educators coming together to talk about the promise of high-speed rail and what that would mean to education and the economy and our youth. In fact, my fellow president from Merced City College was here to also enter his support, but unfortunately had to leave. In the Valley, I think it's important to talk about the work that we've done. As Will spoke about the DRIVE initiative, that work builds upon the K-12 community college, higher ed, business partners work, and countless sessions have occurred in terms of changing our curriculum, how we deliver instruction to prepare for this moment. So fast forward 10 years, I'm now the president of Fresno City College, California's first community college. It was an innovative idea, just like this high-speed rail is an innovative idea. I have over 34,000 students who are looking forward to this plan coming to fruition. In preparation for that, we have altered our curriculum. We've entered into agreements with the trades. We are the #1 transfer agency for STEM and engineering to Fresno State and UC Merced, and I'll wrap up by saying this. I formally want you to know that everybody here has done their work over 10 years to bring forward a plan that is bold for California. Please deliver on that. I formally ask you to approve and implement the business plan. The Valley has worked in good faith to support this worthy endeavor. Please, and also, consider placing the heavy maintenance facility in Fresno. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Ross?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you. My name is Chao. I'm a 33-year member of the IBEW. I'm an electrician by trade, but I am also the elected head of building trades. And I do, with all my support this business plan, the 2020 business plan. We need high-speed rail in the Central Valley. I echo every comment that was made before me. We're highly supportive of it in the Central Valley, always has been. I was part of the Fresno Works team for 10 years ago, 12 years ago. The building trades have modified and engaged in pre-apprenticeship training in preparation for high-speed rail. I've been fortunate enough to take 2 trips to Europe to learn what it takes to build high-speed rail, to maintain high-speed rail. In the Central Valley, it is a game changer. I can echo the comments of Councilmember Carbasi, my good friend Oliver Baines. In the Central Valley, this is a game changer. When you talk about an impact, when you talk about bang for the buck, there is no other place in the state, if not in the nation, where the impact can be more positive. So I highly support the 2020 business plan. Let us continue to do the good work. Let us build this thing out. We are transforming lives. One quick comment, when it talks about our school district, we have the 3rd largest school district in the state in Fresno Unified. I just completed a project labor agreement on one of their schools. The catalyst for that was the high-speed rail. And if I had more time, I can tell you how that whole thing comes to play there. We are in negotiations with a project labor agreement at State Center Community College. There is an MOU to take their certificated students into the building trades. So what we are building because of high-speed rail 10 years ago is a pipeline from K through 12 to State Center Community College to our apprenticeship. We are completing that pipeline in the Central Valley, all with the aspect of high-speed rail coming to the Central Valley, true high-speed rail. So I do support the governor's plan. I do support the 2020 business plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moreno?
Thank you, Chairman, board members. My name is Isaac Moreno. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Selma. I just want to come before you today to be able to support the 2020 business plan. The city is in the process of executing a contract to develop a training program with the high-speed rail currently. As a disadvantaged community, this program will give our citizens and surrounding communities a path to gain the quality jobs, skills that are much needed to increase our low median income levels and reduce our higher than the state average unemployment rates. This program will in turn create job force that can transition directly into a local high-speed rail maintenance facility. And again, this will bring higher paid jobs to our community. Driving in today, I saw a banner hanging from the rail system with a simple but strong statement, 3,000 jobs. Let's continue to work together and grow that number in the Valley and approving the 2020 business plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonardo?
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Leonardo, the Executive Director for the Fresno County Transportation Authority. We administer the half-cent sales tax gathered in Fresno County for transportation. I wanted to tell you, because many of you are different now, but I had the pleasure of actually serving you for 5 years on your rail delivery partner. And so I'm personally very invested in the project. We're working on the Valley EIR-EIS from Fresno down to Bakersfield, the 2 EIRs. You've already heard from others on why we want you to pick the Valley to Valley. I'm not going to go into that in any more depth, but I do want to talk to you just a minute about the heavy maintenance facility, how Fresno County has skin in the game, and I think that's something that's lacking at the other sites. In 2010, the Fresno County Transportation Authority allocated $25 million of our half-cent sales tax towards high-speed rail if the Fresno site was selected for the heavy maintenance facility. In 2017, we partnered with the city of Fresno to obtain options on those properties. So we spent about $500,000 of that. Unfortunately, those options expired before a decision was made, so we no longer have those in place. But there's still $24.5 million that are dedicated to this heavy maintenance facility. On an $80 million project, that's not a lot of money, but still to us, I think $24.5 million is still a lot of money. I'm confident that the Fresno site meets all of the technical criteria for the HMF. It was included in your Fresno to Bakersfield EIR. In fact, there was substantial effort done at the time to make sure that it was environmentally clear because of some issues at the north end. Given the technical adequacy of the site, the fact it's environmentally clear, and that it comes with a $24.5 million incentive, we think that Fresno is clearly the best choice, and we ask that you pick that for the site of your heavy maintenance facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Green. I recently joined the faculty of the Lyles College of Engineering at California State University, Fresno, after more than 20 years in the railway industry. I'm also a member of the High-Speed Rail Committee of the American Railway Engineering and Maintenance of Way Association and the vice chairperson of its Education and Training Committee. The California High-Speed Rail Project was the reason I relocated my family from Illinois to Fresno. At Fresno State, we are excited about the opportunities that the high-speed rail service will bring to our students. We are educating our students for technical careers in the rail industry. We have already began offering courses in railway engineering, and dozens of students are enrolled. Our graduates are making great contributions to the high-speed rail project. Our alumna, Diana Gomez, is a shining example and serves as the Central Valley Director of the project. High-speed rail is an engine for economic growth. In Spain, Germany, and China, cities similar to Fresno have seen great economic growth in a short period of time with high-speed rail. It is critical that the initial segment connecting Fresno with Merced and Bakersfield be completed as originally planned so that it becomes the backbone linking Silicon Valley to Southern California. Also, it is important not to substitute diesels for electric trains. Only electrically powered trains can reach the amazing speeds of 220 miles an hour that we were promised. The emergence of a technologically advanced rail industry in the Central Valley will provide opportunities for research and innovation for the Central Valley's young people. High-speed rail is important for our region and may be the most transformative infrastructure project of our lifetime. We urge you to complete the project as planned, and thank you for your continued support.
Thank you. And while Leanne Eager comes up, I'm going to name the next 5. Matt Fell, Chris Vitelli, Kusan Kim, Dan Wright, and Jofil Borja. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Leanne Eager. For the past over 10 years, decade, I have been the president and CEO of Fresno County Economic Development Corporation, and at the same time, the co-chair of Fresno Works. And all the folks that came up before me were part of the Fresno Works team, which was a support group for high-speed rail. In the state of California right now, there's a project called All Regions Rise Together. Because we know in this state that when one region fails, when one region is in trouble, the entire state is. And we know and historically, that the Central Valley region has had its struggles. The high-speed rail has been one of those shining stars that we have been following for the last 10 years to bring change to the Central Valley, to understand what's going to happen in the Central Valley when we have connectivity between the Central Valley and San Francisco and Los Angeles. And the federal government saw that about 8 years ago when they came to the Central Valley to present us with that check to say, this is the backbone of high-speed rail for California. But the Central Valley is also the backbone of the state of California. We are the ones that are growing the fastest. We are the ones that are continuing to know what the progress is for the state of California. You know, just recently, I heard a comment from someone that said, gee, why Fresno? Why does Fresno think on that page 73 where they list all of those facilities that are coming in the valley, why does Fresno think they deserve those? You might have understood that made me angry. The thing that we have done in the last 10 years, and you just saw, we have been educating our young people. We have been training our workforce. We have been coming together to ensure that we knew exactly what was going to happen to us and with us. We have opened up our arms, and California High-Speed Rail has come through our city, and we have been assisting that. But I can tell you that we have been working for all of those facilities, whichever ones we get. We have been doing the work on the ground. We haven't been hoping that someone will just give it to us. We haven't been hoping that somehow it's going to appear out of nowhere. We have been doing the work. The reason that Fresno deserves any of those or all of those facilities that are on page 73 is because we earned it, because we deserve it, and because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board, staff. My name is Matt Fell. I'm with the Merced County Association of Governments. And in September, we sent a letter expressing our support for the Merced to Bakersfield segment. And I'm here to reiterate that support and express our strong support for the draft 2020 business plan. For all the reasons that were identified, and the plan does a great job of showing how and why Merced to Bakersfield is the right thing to do. I'm especially excited about the mobility hub aspect of this in Merced. So, you know, as a COG, we do transportation planning, but we happen to have a couple side jobs running two transit systems. And so I'm extremely excited about having high-speed rail, ACE, the San Joaquins, and our bus systems all at one spot. It's going to provide fabulous mobility to Merced and connectivity throughout the state. And I really look forward to the day where you'll be able to ride a fast train to downtown Merced, and then you can jump on one of our buses, maybe go to the university, or you can jump on one of our other buses and go all the way to Yosemite National Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vitelli.
Good afternoon. My name is Kusun Kim. I'm Acting Director of Public Works with the City of Manteca. I'm here to express the strong support for the board to move forward with governor's proposal as well as staff's recommendations. I'm not going to repeat all the benefits associated with the proposal. I just want to share two examples because it might be providing kind of insightful the message. The City of Manteca is located in between the Stockton and Modesto. We have State Route 120, which is midpoint between the Central Valley and the Bay Area. So we are seeing huge amount of traffic throughout the State Route 120 every single day. The problem is that whenever the congestion occurs in the morning, we are seeing huge traffic in the local street. Safe route to school measures has been compromised because of the increased commuters traffic in the local downtown. We are suffering from that type of congestion every single day. The second example is that State Route 120, because of the increased traffic, the last 1 mile of the eastbound of the highway became one of the deadliest 1 mile highway stretch in the nation, not just in California, in the nation, because of the traffic. Even though Caltrans, SANAC, and Kopp stakeholders are working together to improve our highway the system, but we know that it's not enough because it might be just a relatively short-term solution considering the fast-growing the population in Central Valley. That's why the success of the all-in terrain services is essential toward implementing the ultimate high-speed rail system between the Bay Area, Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, and Southern California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Annis, hardworking staff from High Speed Rail. My name is Jofel Borja. I represent GM CEO of Sacramento Regional Transit, Henry Lee, to extend our support here of the business plan and in solidarity and partnership with our partners in the Central Valley, as well as Amtrak and San Joaquin. I was once that college student in UC Berkeley back in 2008, championing Prop 1A and getting young adults to be active in not only civic leadership, but really seeing the fruits of the labor of what this could potentially be. And 10 plus years later, I still think that that dream is alive. You know, Sacramento Regional Transit is named as one of those few cities in all of America who's steadily changing the trend of ridership decline and flipping that over. We're able to steadily increase ridership by showing our local and regional communities that, one, public transportation works, two, it's a reliable and safe option for them to get out of single occupancy vehicles, and three, that we can get you there safely. And I hope that the board and the hardworking staff here and the members of the stakeholders and the public do realize that in order for us to make a lasting change, and not only are the working communities of the Central Valley and also here in Sacramento, that we need to invest in good, reliable public transportation, and this business plan is what we think to be a good first step in realizing and making that dream come true. I also want to reiterate that we are supportive of multi-regional alignment and rail infrastructure that would benefit eventually the Sacramento region, and our communities rely on transit services to get them in places of work, their home, and leisure. But we also encourage to have that operating segment for the public to work with the local and regional transit providers, because we want this to be a seamless transaction. We don't want our folks to just see that there's multiple different instances where they have to transfer, but they want this to be a one single ticket from hopefully Sacramento to the Bay or to Southern California. So we urge you guys to continue and support this, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call the remainder because I'm not sure who's still in the room. So I'm going to call the last of them. If you want to just come up, that'd be great. Dan Wright, Chris Vitelli, David Lehman, Steve Cohn. Steve, go ahead and have a seat, and then I'll call the remainder. Consuelo Hernandez, Dylan Stone, Megan Stiles, and Andrew Chesley. Go ahead.
All
please.
right. Steve Cohn, representing the Sacramento Regional Rail Working Group, and also Sacramento, or rather California Breathe, which is a nonprofit that advocates for healthy lungs and clean air throughout our region. I won't read this since it's not for me. I don't know who left that. Anyway, I know the focus of today's hearing, and in fact the business plan, is really on phase one of high-speed rail, which of course did not include Sacramento. But I'm here to talk about Sacramento. You've heard a few of the other speakers from our region. We are in support of the business plan, and in particular the Merced to Bakersfield segment. And let me explain why that matters to Sacramento, and I think the rest of California as well. Years ago, our real connection is just through Capital Corridor, which I co-founded back many years ago. That's been our link by rail, basically. But about 10 years ago, we joined with the Central Valley Working Group, folks like Henry Perea. I know we served as vice chairs of San Joaquin JPA starting not that long ago. And really the idea of the JPA germinated in part from our efforts working together to improve service throughout the Central Valley. What we determined early on was working, and we saw a big change, by the way, in the high-speed rail, both the board and the staff over the last 5 to 10 years, but especially in the last couple under Mr. Kelly's leadership and your board. That Merced connection is critical to take advantage of all the other things that are going on to connect areas outside the initial phase one. So it's really critical. I've taken high-speed rail throughout the world. There's lots of different ways to do it, but the one thing I can tell you is the Merced segment to Bakersfield is key to getting it done in California. Thanks.
Thank you. Come on. The last two coming up, and please say your name when.
Good afternoon. I'm Dylan Stone, the Regional Planning Supervisor with Madera County Transportation Commission. We're the NPO for the Madera County region. I just want to express our support for what we've seen in the draft business plan, as well as the documents that were prepared and presented this morning as well. We've had a chance to review them the past few days, and we are very much in support of the vision that's outlaid in that plan. And we'd implore this board to support that as well. We've been hearing a lot of benefit stuff I've even learned this afternoon here in some of these comments, but I really look at this from the planning perspective. I work on our RTP. I work on modeling. I'm very in tune with the way greenhouse gas emissions are coming out of our vehicles and the relationship between people and place and how we transport between the places we need to go. And I see this plan in the big picture of our long-range plan, our long-range vision in the RTP process as a great opportunity, and one we have a chance to really see come together in a very complete and comprehensive way as we look to branch out to our valley-to-valley connection and to Southern California. So we just want to express our strong support for this plan. We're very encouraged by its contents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, Board, Consuelo Hernandez was due to speak, our Governmental Affairs Director for the City of Sacramento. She had to leave, so I'm going to take her place if it pleases the Board. My name is Greg Taylor. I'm Supervising Architect and Project Manager on the Sacramento Valley Station in Sacramento. I'd like to read some excerpts from a letter we submitted to the Chair on October 31st. On behalf of the City of Sacramento, I'm here to express our continued support of high-speed rail and the Governor's Plan and CHSRA's policy recommendations to pursue a Merced-Fresno-Bakersfield interim operating segment that provides Sacramento a connection to high-speed rail service at Merced in the Phase 1 project. This support is consistent with our current general plan policies. Sacramento continues to support the eventual Phase 2 extension into the city. However, this segment to Merced will allow a direct connection to the high-speed system, leveraging the state's funding of expanding San Joaquin and anticipated Altamont Corridor Express service originating in Sacramento, with the $500.5 million funding from the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. Sacramento rail passengers will greatly benefit from reducing train travel to and from the Central Valley and Southern California. Direct connections in Merced to ACE and the San Joaquins will also translate into faster connections and positive ridership effects to the Capital Corridor system and Sacramento Regional Transit. The success of this early interim service is essential towards implementing the ultimate high-speed rail system between Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, and Southern California. And as project manager of the Sacramento Valley Station, I'd just like to add that we're currently in a master plan process that is looking forward 2040 and beyond, following the state rail plan, with every intention of those higher capacity connections to high-speed rail through the Merced opportunities to the Southern California via Merced, and the connecting bus and regional service in Northern California. We support this plan wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one last public comment, unless there's anyone whose name I called who hasn't been. Okay, please, final comment.
Everything that can be said has been said. It's just that not everybody has said it yet. Andrew Chesley, I'm the Executive Director of the San Joaquin Council of Governments in Stockton. Thank you, Chair, members of the authority, for your time and energy in terms of delivering this important transportation project in California. Like the speakers before me, I come to support the draft business plan that you have in front of you. It's an articulate statement of the opportunities of coordinating passenger rail service in Northern California and the Central Valley. I'd also like the speakers before me, I want to support the interim operational alignment from Merced to Bakersfield. It's best for California high-speed rail, for the passenger rail services available in Northern and Central California, and most importantly for the traveling public of the state of California. So we submitted a letter in support of this, and I thank you very much for your time and attention.
Great. Thank you very much. Excuse me, and thank you to all of the 35 members of the public who spoke in this last period. It's important that we get that commentary, and thank you to all of our board members for listening attentively during this time. That concludes our public comment section. I'd now like to turn it back to Chairman Kelly for a brief CEO report, then we'll do the Finance and Audit Committee report briefly, and then we have a short executive session. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. I quickly want to run through the CEO report with the board that I do at each meeting, and mostly I want to do this because it reflects one of the things we've been trying to achieve certainly since I've been here and working with the board, and that is to be as definitive as we can about the work that's in front of us, so that it really sets a direction for our staff and lays out the points of achievement that we hit going forward, so we can show the public progress on the project. And there's a couple of things that I just want to point to. You are all aware that we are meeting our environmental deadlines as one of the requirements we have under our federal funding agreement. And I wanted to inform the board in between this hearing and our next hearing, we will be putting out on the streets for public comment the draft environmental document, EIR and EIS, for the Bakersfield to Palmdale segment. This is our first advancement into the Southern California region, but putting that document out for public comment is a very important part of getting to the certified ROD that we are committed to complete in early 2021. So we'll be putting that out at the end of February. On the heels of that, we will move forward with putting out the draft environmental document for the Merced to San Jose segment in Northern California. We look to put that out in early April, but I want to flag it now as the second element that we're working on in order to make sure we meet the requirements of the environmental documents being adopted under our federal funding agreement. I want the board members to get used to me saying this at every hearing, because we've got about 6 segments that we're going to just keep putting out draft environmental documents on over the course of the next 6 months. Once we put the draft out, it opens up our communications with the public to take public comment on those drafts. We'll do town halls, workshops, stakeholder engagement meetings, and we'll take that public comment, and this sets us up to come back to you all for approval of a certified ROD on these segments over the course of the next year. So these are very important steps that we're making, and I wanted to outline those for the board. There are 2 stations that we are involved with the planning and funding on that I want to briefly touch base with the board on. One is the DISC or Diridon station, and the planning exercise we're involved in there in San Jose. I'm pleased to report that we've reached a milestone with what we call the Diridon Integrated Station Concept Plan process, which is a partnership between us, VTA, Caltrain, and the City of San Jose to develop the vision for the future of the Diridon, the vision for what the future of the Diridon station can be. At this point, we're wrapping up the first phase with a concept layout that includes elevating the tracks, having 2 concourses at the station, and primarily utilizing the existing rail corridors north and south of the station. This is important because those access points north and south are consistent with the preferred alternatives that this board adopted in September of last year. Let's see. We have published this recommendation in November with the other agencies. After additional review, the San Jose City Council voted to accept it earlier this month. While this project is still early in the planning process, these preliminary concepts will be further developed and evaluated as we move on to the next phase of station planning with our partners in Silicon Valley. We'll bring back to the board and report back to the board on this effort as appropriate and as it progresses. Lastly, I just want to update the board. I mentioned twice or 3 or 5 or 10 times before that our March hearing will be in Los Angeles. We are working at the staff level with the leadership of the LA Metro Board to move forward and hopefully bring before the board the funding plan that we need to have adopted with the review that's done from the independent financial review group on our investment in the LA Union Station. That's a 2-phase project, and again, we're hoping to have that before the board at the March hearing in Los Angeles. So with that, I want to conclude my CEO report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A question for Mr. Kelly.
Yes, ma'am.
When you say that you're going to release the draft EIRs and the draft EIS, does that assume that all the relevant rights-of-way problems and utility relocations already happened?
No, because the release of the environmental document is on the front end of that work. We have to get the environmental documents done so we can then further be clear with the public on what the alignment is, what we're building. As we get those done, we then start to advance the design work to identify the right-of-way that we need to put in place in those segments, and start identifying where the utility relocations are that need to occur.
So you can't do that concurrently?
To some extent you can, but you got to get the design brought out much beyond 15%. And so 15% is about where you are at the environmental process. I got to say, though, it is a vitally important process to allow us to get there. We got to get the alignment set. We got to get it in place. We got to complete the rods. Then we can start the important project development work.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anything else from Mr. Kelly? Okay. Vice Chairman Richards, do you want to report briefly on the F&A meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll make it very quick. 4 or 5 items from the F&A meeting today. One, staff has been successful at helping to reduce our management, I should say, of reducing staff vacancies by the reporting period was a reduction of 2 or the vacancies, and 2 others have occurred since then. There is a budget reforecast in process. We're expecting more information in the March-April time period. We do know that the forecast for the 1920 budget is being reduced from $2.55 billion down to $1.6. We'll provide more information as it becomes available to us. With regards to the federal funds that grants that we've taken, we've got a requirement to match those grants to the extent of $2.5 billion. Thus far, the Federal Highway Administration has approved $477 million. There is another $832 million pending and $638 million in process. With the pending and in process, at whatever point they become approved, it would mean that the state has met $2 billion of its $2.5 billion match. We're going to be taking a closer look at the small business utilization, which, as you know, our aspirational goal is 30%. We've been hovering at around 21% for some time. We're expecting increases as construction increases, but we're looking to make sure that we are doing everything we can do to reach that aspirational goal. And we're getting better and faster information with improvements in our IT processes, and the output is very noticeable to the committee. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any question?
Chair Richards, I just had a quick question on your committee. I was there this morning. I didn't hear the answer. If I could ask you if I could get just a specific report on when Tulare Avenue is scheduled to be opened in Fresno, and if we don't have a date yet, what are the specific issues and what's being done to address those issues?
I'll get that for you, Chairman, or Director Perea. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the F&A report? Okay, then we will briefly go into an executive session, and we'll direct us to where that will be, and then we'll come back to adjourn the meeting. So thank you, everyone. Nothing to report back from the executive session, and the meeting is adjourned.